Hello, beautiful people. I'm so glad that you are here. Welcome to my course, A Complete Guide to Linux Security. When we are talking about security, then there is no compromise. Yes, you probably know everything about Linux, but when you are working in a corporate environment, it is your responsibility to make sure your system is fully secured. And that's what you're going to learn in this course. When you finish this course, you will be able to go out there, take that server of yours, and you're going to make that server very, very secure. My name is Imran Afzal, and I've been in IT since 2000. I have been teaching thousands and thousands of students worldwide. I have helped so many of my students getting a job of their dream. When I teach, I make sure you understand every single concept of that topic. I actually graduated from Baruch College, City University of New York, and my concentration was computers information systems. I did my master's in business administration from New York Institute of Technology. I have worked for Fortune 500 companies in New York City. So all I'm telling you, once you're going to take my course, at the end of the course, you're going to learn everything you need to know about that specific topic. So what are you waiting for? Let's go ahead and enroll. Hello folks, and welcome to the course overview. This is a course overview for our course, which is Guide to Linux Security. Please do spend a couple of minutes with me and we'll go together to see what exactly we are covering in this entire course. And the very first section is going to be the introduction and course overview. The introduction is about the background, my academic, my experience, which I have already covered in the previous lecture. In this one, we're covering the course overview as I'm going through right now, and then in the end, you will have the option to download the syllabus. Then moving on to section 2, which is setting up the lab. So of course you have to have a Linux machine to actually practice this entire course. If you already have a Linux machine, then it's great. You could just simply go ahead and skip this entire section. But if you don't, and also I would highly recommend that you go through the installation of Linux again for this course. It will be a good refresher for your installation experience. So what we're going to cover in this section is first we're going to download and install Oracle VirtualBox. Oracle VirtualBox is a software that allows you to actually run multiple virtual machines on a single server or a host. Then we're going to create our first virtual machine on that Oracle VirtualBox software, and of course then we'll do the Linux installation. In this course, we are going through the Linux CentOS installation. If you have any other Linux flavor, that's good. But as I said before, please, I will recommend that you go through the CentOS installation with me because a lot of things that I'm covering is more closely related to CentOS and can be applicable to other operating system as well. Alright, now coming to section 3, which is the actual contents where you're going to find everything about Linux security. One by one, we're going to cover starting with what is security and what exactly we are covering about the security. Securing all operating system, not just Linux. We will talk about how important it is that if you have a multiple operating system in your environment, then how important it is to cover and secure all those operating systems. Then, of course, we'll go more into detail about the importance of security overall. We'll talk about type of security breaches. Then we'll learn how to change the password parameters, creating user accounts and changing their passwords. Then setting up password policies, how a password should have how many length, what's the size of it, how complicated it should be. That's going to be all under password policy. Then we'll talk about disabling SSH access for certain users. Maybe there are users who just need to run certain commands and they don't need SSH access. We'll lock and disable user accounts manually or automatically. We'll lock user accounts after 3 failed attempts, meaning if they try to log into the system with the wrong password, that's a three times in a row, we'll lock their account. We'll learn that in that lecture. Will restrict direct root log into a system. There shouldn't be a direct root log into any system. It's a best practice. Linux file system ownership and files directories permissions. We'll change file permissions, and that has been divided into two different parts, part one and part two. And then we'll learn how we could change the SSH port. So right now, by default, SSH port is port 22. We'll learn how we could change that so the hacker would not try to attack our port 22. Message of the day. When you log in, what will you see on the banner? That's important. Set up one service per server, meaning if you have a DNS server and FS service, it's better to run one service per server, and we will learn about the importance of running on each server. To do as the last thing, I want you to do some homework. Go through the practice with me of every lecture that I'm covering. And of course, read through the handouts that I have attached with this course. Good luck. I'll see you in the next lecture. Importance of Linux security. We're going to spend so much time talking about Linux, how we could secure the Linux operating system. But first, let's take a look at why it is so important to put a security around Linux. So the first thing that we need this Linux security is to protect our data. So data is the most valuable thing in the computer or in IT world, and everything we do in IT is about data. So when you say IT, it's information over technology. So what is that information? That information is saved in terms of as data. So we need to protect that data, and that's why we need a Linux security or any type of security where that data is sitting, whether it's Windows security or Solaris security. But security around operating system is the primary reason is to protect that data. Second is to protect the system resources. So of course you're gonna get attacked by people who would actually attack your server. They could actually attack specifically through your memory or to your CPU or directly to your disk. So where all these resources become inoperable. So when you cannot, or when your memory or when your computer memory or CPU or disk cannot function, or they get infected with the virus, what happens? Then you lose your workflows, your application workflows. So you need to protect your application workflows as well. And those workflows run with the help of memory, CPU, disk, and many other computer resources. So computer resources in the background are working hand in hand just to make sure the applications that run on top of them are supported. Then another important thing of Linux security. Now keep in mind all these Linux security, the importance, why do we need it? All of these that I have listed here are through my personal experiences. If you go on Google or any search engine and type importance of Linux security or why do we need Linux security, most likely you're not going to find anything. You're probably going to find so many of Linux security tips and tools that would tell you how to secure Linux, but you're not going to find why do we need to secure. So I'm listing all these topics, all these big points here to make you understand the importance of having Linux security. Anyway, moving on, the fourth and the most important of having Linux security is because of the audit compliance. We do get audited, or companies do get audited, and every time they get audited, they have to provide how they are protecting the customer if they have any customers, or how are they protecting the data, or how or what type of practices they have in place to protect their resources. There is something called SOC, which stands for Service Organization Controls. Also, maybe you have heard of SOC reports. The SOC reports actually became effective on June 15th, 2011. Now, these reports can be requested by government or by your clients or anybody external to your company or even your board members. So if you're running a company, let's say ABC, anyone who is actually has any type of involvement or has any incentives that is vested to or in your company can come in and request that SOC reports. So because we need to have those SOC reports are generated based on all those Linux security standards. Moving on, we need Linux security for less human errors. So we don't make any mistakes. We make things so secure. Even if I fat finger or mistype something, we will make less errors. Then control management, of course, security is implemented so we make, of course, less mistake and we give the control to who gets what or who can access what. So let's say if I want John to log into this machine and I don't want John to not log into this machine. Why is that? Because of the security concern. If I want John to access this file and I want John not to access the other file. Why? Because the John does not have privy or is not privy to the other file and he could only view the other file. That is also a security mechanism we put in place. Then, of course, in the end is the peace of mind, which is what everybody needs when you have security around. Just like I explained earlier, when you have locks in your house, when you have locks in your drawer, everything is secure. You sleep good at night. Why? Because you have that peace of mind that your house is secure. Just like that. When your environment, when your computer, your Linux environment is secure, your manager, yourself, or anybody who is involved in Linux security will be sleeping really nicely at night and, of course, will have a peace of mind. These are the few Linux security tips, or not the tips, Linux security importances that I wanted to discuss. And as I said again, all of them are based on my own experiences. Okay, we have talked about how important it is to implement security in our environment. But now let's talk about what are the different tools or different ways we could implement the security. First one is through the manual security configuration, meaning you log into the system manually and you configure and apply all the security measures manually one by one. And those measures are user accounts, meaning which user account should be created, who should get what access, what type of limitation they should have on their accounts, file systems, system access, who should be accessing the system. By the way, for the file system, who should be accessing which file, which directory, and coming down to system access, who should or who is allowed to access that system or who is allowed in that system to go outside and where. Then system security, like the system itself, whether it is the security around process, security around disks, security around CPU, memory, how it is accessed, or how you want to change the behavior of a kernel. All that security can be implemented through the system configuration files. Then the OS network layer security. So at the network side, because when you run ifconfig command on your Linux machine, you will see the network ports and the network IP addresses. That's where the traffic leaves your machine and traffic comes to your machine. And there are actually security you could implement around it, like firewalls and the IP rules tables. There's so many of them that we could talk about it. By the way, all of these listed here are the manual security configuration that you could apply. And there's so many others that we will talk about in this entire training. So the first point that I'm trying to make is it's through the manual security configuration where you log into the system, go through each configuration file or whichever the security measures that you want to take and apply it. Then the next one is automation through the script. So what do? all the steps that I have listed above, you put it in a script. You log into that machine, you put the script in there, or you copy it there, or you access it through NFS or Samba, or whichever way you access it. Then you execute that script. So create it, copy over, and then execute it. If you have multiple servers, then you could perform that script execution on every server one by one. Now, a lot of people have actually followed this if they have multiple servers. Of course, you don't want to log into every server one by one and then do the manual configuration because that task is tedious, and the automation piece or to script it is one of the major or biggest tasks of a system administrator who should do that. Then the deployment tools. Nowadays, you have heard of tools such as Ansible, Puppet, or Chef. These are the tools that are available to you. So the way it works is you set up a new virtual machine or a new system, whether it's physical or virtual. You put that virtual machine's keys, the security keys and IP, to that tool, the Ansible Puppet. Then that tool has that built-in automation scripts, and it will execute it against all those servers that you specified. So of course you need some experience around Ansible and these tools to work on it. Then the last one, the security implementation tool, is through the third-party security software. Maybe there are tools out there that would provide all the security measures that you see above there, but every environment is different. If you are working for ABC and the other person is working for XYZ, you probably have a different way of securing your users as the other person who's working for XYZ. So maybe the third party tools are not the ideal tools for everyone. The third party tools are best for people who want to actually implement security, predefined security that comes with it, such as a software like McAfee. They have a predefined security measure tools that are built in. When you install it, it actually protects your system against the outside invasion. So you don't want someone else or someone from the outside to actually um, log into your system or invade your system. So these are the type of security tools that helps you protect against the security breach. So again, not ideal for all security measures. If you are going through the manual steps that we have listed above, then this third-party software tools does not work. Anyway, to summarize it, manual security, automation through the scripts or through the deployments tools. And of course, you could use a third-party software as well. Let's talk about types of security breach. We will talk so much about how we could secure our Linux system, but before we get into that, let's talk about what are the different ways the security can be breached. The first one is about data. So data is the number one security breach. Anyone who hacks your system or invades it or breaks the security barrier, they want the data. And as I said before, the whole IT is about information, and that information is secured and saved in data. So when the data is breached, they could be that could be stolen, it could be corrupted, or it could be removed from your entire system. So data is the number one security breach. Then moving on, the application. The application security breach, meaning all the application or the software that is running on your operating system. When someone hacks your system and they cannot get to the data, then the second target would be the application, meaning they will disable or they will dismantle the application that actually processing the data. So that could be like an Apache server. If you are on a retail industry and you know you make millions of dollars in a day on a retail, and especially during the day during the holiday season, and bringing down your Apache server which is actually the front end of your system that is taking all the requests, will actually impact your revenue. Another example of application would be the database. So you're running Microsoft SQL or Oracle database or Informix, any type of data. So the attack could be on your database. Then the financial application. If you are into a financial world or if you're running on financial, you've probably seen so much security around it. So they have applications that are actually crunching the numbers. What will happen if those financial applications are brought down? Well, this will disable the entire financial sector. So that's why every time an invader or hacker tries to get into a machine, they will try to attack those financial applications. Then moving on, the third type of security breach is this operating system. So if a hacker cannot get to the data or applications, then they get to the operating system, the system that is actually facilitating the entire process, the system that is saving the data, the system that is providing the resources. So that could be file system corruption, or it could be a complete system failure. Your whole system is down, or the process management. Anything that runs on the memory or CPU processes that is actually handed over from one place to another, that could be impacted. Then the last one is the hardware system security breach, where someone would actually attack your hardware and actually attack on your CPU, your memory, or your system peripherals, and actually disable or remove or actually corrupt your system peripheral devices, and those are so important for your system to run or function. So there are a few of the security breach that we need to talk about, and we have actually listed all of them. We need to make sure all of these data application and operating system hardware are protected. And how are we going to protect them is everything that we will talk about in the coming lectures. In this lecture, we are going to cover the Oracle VirtualBox. We will go through the download and the installation of VirtualBox. Now, as I said previously, the Oracle VirtualBox is is a virtual environment which allows you to run a multiple operating system on the same hardware. There are other virtual platform that is available out there that you could use. You don't have to go with VirtualBox if you don't like it. You could use VMware Player Workstation, as well as other open source virtual environment. But anyway, I would prefer if you stick with Oracle VirtualBox, so this way we could go through the course together. Alright, so I will go open up my Firefox browser so I could download the VirtualBox software. You could use any browser you like. Then I'm going to the Google page, and in the Google page, I'm searching for Oracle VirtualBox. When you click on it, you're going to see the first link as Oracle VM VirtualBox. So you could click on it and then go to download, or you could go straight to the download page. Alright, on the download page, you're going to see the section where it says VirtualBox version platform packages. Now, depending on when you are downloading this VirtualBox, the version will be higher, maybe 1, 2, or whichever the version at that time you're downloading. It doesn't matter. Don't be confused. Oh, the one I am showing you is 6.0 and the one you are seeing is a different version. Basically, what we want at the end is a virtual platform that we could run our guest instances or guest operating system on it. Anyway, if you are using the Windows as your main host where you will run the Linux CentOS as a VM, then pick Windows host. If you are using OS X host, meaning if you are using Apple, then you could use this one. For Linux, for Solaris, for other operating systems, you could pick depending on your requirement of your actual operating system. Go ahead and click on Windows host because I am running Windows host, and that's where I'm going to run my VirtualBox. Now here it is asking me to save the file, and you could click, but I'm not going to click to save the file because I have already saved it to save some time. So if you have not saved it previously, so go ahead and click on this, and it will ask you to the location to save it. So I'm going to cancel it since, as I said, I have already saved it. Alright, I have my VirtualBox executable saved on my desktop, and here is the executable. All I have to do is go ahead and double click so it could start the installation. So once you double click on it, it will ask you, do you want to run this file? Click on run. Okay, now the wizard has started. It says welcome to the Oracle VM VirtualBox 6.0.14 setup wizard. The setup wizard will install Oracle VM VirtualBox on your computer. Click next to continue or cancel to exit the setup wizard. Go ahead and click next. Select the way you want features to be installed. So by default, the VirtualBox application has been selected, and the other features that comes with it, I'm going to leave everything at default. And it also tells you the version installing the feature requires 227 megabyte that you should have on your disk. So go ahead and click next. Please choose from the options below. Create start menu entry, create a shortcut on desktop, create a shortcut on quick launch bar, register file association. I like them all, leave them default, except I don't like create a shortcut in quick launch bar. So I'm going to uncheck it. Again, that's my preference. You could leave all of them selected. Click next. Network warning, network interface. Installing the Oracle VM VirtualBox networking feature will reset your network connection and temporarily disconnect you from the network. Proceed with installation. So that's fine. So make sure you are not connected to the internet, or if you are, make sure you're not doing any type of work that you will lose. So go ahead and click yes, and click install to begin the installation. Install. I am going to fast forward at this part because I don't want you to wait. I don't want to waste your time. So I'm going to just simply fast forward. Okay, so the Oracle VM VirtualBox installation is complete. You can leave the check mark so it'll start it back up, and you could click on Finish. Congratulations, you have completed the download and the installation of Oracle VirtualBox. Now the next step is to create a test virtual machine, and then of course we will go ahead and do the actual operating system install on that virtual machine. Hello everyone, in this lecture we are going to create a virtual machine on our VirtualBox, the VirtualBox application that we have downloaded in the previous lecture, and now I'm going to show you how you could create a virtual machine. So I'm going to start up the VirtualBox. This is what I have it open already, and the version that I'm using for the VirtualBox is, when you go to help and click on about VirtualBox, is VirtualBox 6.0. If you're using a little later version or updated version, that is perfectly fine. Every version would just work fine. Now, as an example, as a test, we are going to create a new virtual machine. So I want you to go ahead and click on a new. And here I want you to type, for example, my Linux VM. So now as you type this, it's going to tell you where it's going to save the information of the Linux machine. So it picked up this location by default. Next one, it says the type. The type is Linux, of course, because I have typed the name, it automatically picked it up that it's assuming there's a Linux machine, and the version is Linux 6 2.634, or whichever version, and it says 64-bit. Now, if your computer right now or your virtual machine setting is showing 32-bit, which is this, and you do have a 64-bit operating system, then what you need to do is you need to enable virtualization technology in your BIOS setting. So again, if it is showing 32-bit, then first thing you need to confirm is that your computer that where you're running this virtual box actually is 64. So I could confirm by going into my computer. I could go into my computer right here, right click on it, go to properties, and in my computer properties you're going to see that I have a system type as 64-bit operating system. So if this is your system type is showing right now 64-bit operating system, and you're still seeing this version showing up as 32-bit, then it means that you have to go into your computer BIOS setting to enable virtualization. And how to do that, I have included an article in this lecture, in the description, that will make you go through how you could enable that. Anyway, so once you have it enabled, good, reboot your machine and it will show up as 64-bit. Now the next thing is you need to define the memory. Memory is the memory of your virtual machine. It's just like if you are going to a store, right? Let's say if you're going to Best Buy or any computer store, and you pick up the laptop and or computer and you ask how much memory it has. This is exact same way that you are doing, but the difference is that now you are the manufacturer. You are the one who is putting in the memory inside of your computer. By default, I'm going to leave it as 1024 megabyte, which is 1 gig. The next part is hard disk. Create a virtual hard disk now. Leave that as default and click on create. Then it says the file size here is 8 gig by default. It's picking it up. I want you to pick 10 gig just to make sure we have enough space when we are going through all the exercises of our training. Alright, so then hard disk file type is VDI, virtual box disk image, which is by default is the right file type, so leave that as is. Storage on physical hard disk, dynamically allocated, leave that as default as well. If you need to know more about it, what's the difference between each one of them, I'm sure you could go and click on guided mode, or you could also look it up online on the difference of each of these hard disk type. Go ahead and click create. And now you're going to see right here, it's going to show you my Linux VM and its configuration or specification of that VM. The general information showing up here, the system information is up here, the display, storage, audio, network, USB, shared folders, all that. It is just like as if you have an actual machine. So anyway, you have created your virtual machine. This is the lecture I wanted to go through, how you could create a virtual machine. When I am going to go through the next lecture where we will do the actual CentOS or Linux installation, then I will ask you to create the virtual machine again. So for this lab purposes, just go ahead, click on the machine, then right click and click on remove, and then just click on delete all files. Beautiful. All right, so that was just an exercise. Let's move on. Hello everyone, let's get into the fun part where we will do the Linux download and installation. And for the installation that I have picked is a CentOS operating system. CentOS operating system is just like a Red Hat operating system, and it's a free, and I would definitely recommend you using CentOS for this course because a lot of companies out there that use a Red Hat for their corporate environment. Now for the version part, I am using CentOS 7. There's also a version 8 that is out there already. If you want to use version 8, you can. That is perfectly fine because my course follow both 7 and 8. But my recommendation is that you stick with 7 because a lot of companies, I would say 95 to 99% of them, are still using older versions like 5, 6, and 7. So it will take them at least 3, 4 years to get onto 8. So if you're in the job market or you want to get into the job market, I would recommend you that you stick to 7. Now, for those who wants to go with the Red Hat 8 or CentOS 8, perfectly fine. You could skip this lecture and go to the very next lecture, which has CentOS 8 instructions for download installation. All right, without further ado, let me get into the download part. So for the download, what you have to do, you have to go into your browser, whichever browser you like, go to Google or any search engine and type CentOS download ISO. Now, by default, it will give you the first page, which will have the link to CentOS 8. We don't want 8 again, we want 7. So let's go back and I want you to type specifically CentOS 7 download ISO and go to the second link which says index of CentOS 7. Click on that. Now click on x86 underscore 64-bit. Now again, every image, if you click on it, you're probably going to get different links of the mirrors. You could pick any one that gives you that CentOS 7. But it doesn't really matter. I'll go to the second one and I'll click on the 64-bit. Your architecture has to be 64-bit. If it's 32, search for 32-bit. Then click on any mirror that you like and it will start the download. So you go into this ISO, CentOS 7 x86 1908. Doesn't matter which version or which build it has. Maybe you have a later one, maybe you have an older one. It doesn't really matter. What matters is it's CentOS 7. So go ahead and click on ISO and save. I will not save it because I have already saved it earlier to save time, save your time and save my time. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel. So anyway, for in your case, once you click on OK, it will start downloading and it will show up here if you're using Firefox. Once it's downloaded completed, then you need to go to your Oracle VM VirtualBox. Now, if you do not have VirtualBox, that is the latest version. This one, the one I have, is 6.0. If you do not have 6.0, I would recommend that you upgrade it to the newer version. So now I will go ahead and create a new virtual machine. I'll click on new. And the name that I will pick is my first Linux VM. That's just the name of this virtual machine on the virtual box. You could pick any name, but if you want to go along with me, pick that name. By default, you see it is picking up Linux type because I typed in the name as Linux, and the version it's giving up as Linux 2.63.x, 4.x, or 64. If you do not see 64 here, you see 32-bit, then you need to change your BIOS configuration of when you start up your own laptop or PC, you have to go to your BIOS setting and enable virtualization. If you need instructions, I have included the instruction. I have given the link to an article which will walk you through one by one as how you could enable that virtualization in your BIOS. So anyway, if it is showing 64-bit, perfect. Go ahead and click next. The memory size is 1 gig, 1024 megabyte, which equates to 1 gigabyte. That's good. Leave as default. Next, create a virtual hard disk. By default, it's telling me the recommended size is 8 gig. You could leave 8 gig or you could change it. We will change it in the next one, in the next slide. So create a virtual disk. Click create. VDI, which is the default one, leave it default. Click next. Dynamically allocated, yes, leave it default. Click next. And now the size. By default, as I said, it's going to give you 8. But for this lab, I want you to type 10 and click on create. Now, our virtual machine is created. As you could see, it's right here saying my first Linux VM. So let me go back in here, and this way I have a clear background. Alright, so now what you need to do is once your VM is created, go ahead and click on start. All right, so once you start it, by default, it will ask you, I do not have any operating system. Of course, this is just an empty shell or empty virtual machine. Now I need to attach an ISO image to it. And that ISO image is the same ISO image that we downloaded earlier, that is CentOS 7 ISO image. So go ahead and click on this little folder, and now it will ask you where is your ISO image located. My ISO image is located in my personal folder and in my ISO, and I have right here it says CentOS 7. So go ahead and select that and now click on start. Okay, and on this page by default, it will come on this option which says test this media and install CentOS. I do not want to test. Sometimes this option is good if you are installing with the actual CD-ROM, the physical one, the CD, because sometimes it has scratches and it could impact your installation. So that's why you should always test that media before you do the installation. But since we did the ISO image download, and I am very hopeful and I'm sure that the installation, or sorry, the download was not corrupted. So I'm going to use my up and down arrow key, and I'm going to select the first one which says install CentOS 7, and I'm going to hit enter. Now what it's going to do now is it's going to read the content of the ISO. It will copy the content of the ISO, the ones that it needs to start the installation. It will bring it into the memory, and then it will start an installation wizard that's called Anaconda. That's just a name of the wizard that CentOS uses. It will start and it will help us going through the installer process from one step to another. Alright, so right here you're going to see it says the virtual machine reports that the guest OS supports mouse pointer integration. This means that you do not need to capture the mouse pointer. That is fine. You could go ahead and cancel that. By the way, if your mouse is stuck inside of this window, then you could use the right click. You see right here, this little thing says the right control key. This is the control key on your keypad, and that is on your right hand side. So once you press that key, then it will release your mouse. But if it is your mouse is really going outside, perfect. Anyway, let's get into it. Now, what language would you like to use during the installation process? I am in United States and of course the English speaker, so I'm going to go ahead and pick English and the English for the United States. If you are in a different country, depending on your preferred language, you could go ahead and select your desired language. Now go ahead and click on continue. Alright, in the next page it says installation summary. And this US is basically the keyboard that has been selected. You don't need to click on that. The first thing you need to click is date and time. So date and time is by default. For me, it is already selected my US time. I am in New York. It actually recognized that, so I'm going to leave that as default, and I'm going to click on done. Then it's going to say language support, and as I said previously, we selected English, and for the English United States, go ahead and click done. If you want to change it, you could change it here as well. By default, it picks up my keyboard as United States English keyboard. If you are again in different country, you could pick according to your requirement. Now comes to the part, let's scroll down on the right hand side by grabbing the scroll bar, and then it says the next one, it says software installation source, which is local media, which is our ISO image that is attached to this virtual box. So you can leave that as is. Software selection, it says minimal install. When you pick minimal install, it will not install the GUI. It will only install the text way or command line on your operating system. But for this lab, I want you to go ahead and click on it, and I want you to select server with GUI. This way you will have the server with the graphical user interface, and you will see if certain things that you could add, remove using the GUI. But again, I would say about 80% of the corporate environment do not use GUIs. they always use a command line interface because GUI takes a lot of resources and it could also make your system a little vulnerable for the security threats. So if you are in production or corporate environment, check with your company policy and then you should select the software selection. Also, if you are building a server for different purposes, you're gonna see that the servers has a lot of add-ons that you could do. So when you go to minimal install, you're gonna see it has security tools, smart card support, system administration tools. And you go to compute node, it has all the other add-ons selected tools and software that are available to you. Again, it depends what kind of application you will run on this operating system. Based on that, you could select any tools or any add-ons, tools or applications that you want. Similarly, when you go to infrastructure server, you probably heard of many of these servers like FTP server, NFS server, DNS server, all that stuff. If you wanted to have them installed, you could actually select them here, so it will install that package. But anyway, if you do not select any package right now at this point, and you remember later on that you need to install, not to worry about, you could just simply do the yum install command, which we will cover later in other lectures. That I will show you how you could install the add-on selected add-on packages. Again, file and print server will give you different options, basic server, web servers. I do want you to go through them one by one. I don't want you to select any of them, but again, if you want to select, that's perfectly fine. But I just want you to get familiar with what are the options that are available on this menu. But for this lab purposes, for this training, I just want you to select the server with GUI. And now I want you to go ahead and click Done. Now it's actually checking the software from the ISO. It's basically the software selection is going to the ISO and asking, "Hey ISO, I've been asked to select server with GUI. Do you have the required package?" So that's why it's kind of like going back and forth and checking. So anyway, while it's checking, we'll go into the next one where it says system and it says installation destination. By the way, it's finished and it worked. It came back and it says yes, I do. The next one is installation destination, meaning where do you want to install this operating system? Which disk? You remember we picked 10 gig of disk, so we'll go ahead and select this one. And by default, it has already selected 10 gig. Then it has check marked on it. And other storage options, it says partitioning. It says automatically configure partitioning. So we are not going to partition it ourselves. We will let Linux pick the partitions for its own, which is a default partition for the 10 gig disk. And now we go ahead and click on Done. Now installation destination is done. Kdump is when if there's something goes wrong with your system and it crashes, it has to log something that why it crashes. And that kind of kernel dump is when if you have it enabled, then it will actually spit out all the information to a log file. So when you have it enabled, that's only when you have it in. It will spit out the logs only when you have it enabled. Okay, so network and host name. So that's where we need to define the network and the host name of the operating system. So you go ahead and click on it. And host name right here, you see the hostname.local domain. I want you to highlight the entire entry and type in my first Linux VM and click on apply. As soon as you click on apply, you see right here it says current host name, which is localhost, which what it had before. So once you click on apply, it will change it right here, my first Linux VM. So you probably notice that I put in uppercase the first letters and it changed it to lowercase. Because remember, Linux is um, a case sensitive operating system, meaning it matters if you put in uppercase and lowercase, but it prefers that you always use lowercase letters. All right, so now let's go into the network where it says Ethernet ENP0S3. Right now, this is the network port that is assigned on your virtual box. So right now, you see it has a hardware, which is a MAC address. It has a speed of 1 gig, and its subnet mask is by default is picking up its local IP. So what we need to do is we need to click on configure, because you see right now it's turned off. Let's go ahead and click on configure. And the only thing I want you to pick in configure is go to general and click on automatically connect to this network when it is available. Now what this does is it actually um, start your network or pick up an IP whenever your computer or your operating system restarts. So go ahead and click on save. And you're going to see right away it picked up. And by the way, this is going to be your Wi-Fi network adapters that is given to you by your VirtualBox. So now go ahead and click on done. Alright, the last part is security profile. So we do not have any security profile, but if you are doing this installation for your company, check with your company and check with your security folks. See if they have any security that they use or any template, then you could attach it here, which would apply all the security settings. But anyway, this is lab and this is something we're going to be learning later on. So now I want you to go ahead and click on begin installation. All right, in this next page, you're going to get two options while it's going to run the pre-configuration or pre-installation checks and stuff. It is asking us to create a root password. So go ahead and click on root password. By default, root is a system administrative password in Linux. So I want you to pick a root password. I picked a weak password. That is why it's saying this yellow thing at the bottom. It says the password you have provided is weak. The password fails the dictionary check. It is based on a dictionary word. You will have to press done twice to confirm. So if your password is weak, right now as what I have, my password is weak. So you would have to select it done, and another time you have to click done twice. Second option is your user creation. I want you to go ahead and click on user creation. And this is a regular user, not a root or not an administrative user. So I am going to create my account. I'm going to pick my name, Imran Afzal, and the username by default, it'll pick my first initial followed by the last name. And the password, leave the other setting as default. Again, my password is weak, so now I have to select done twice. 1, 2. Alright, so now you notice right here it's saying installing genome user docs and installing this and that. These are all the packages that it needs to install to complete my installation. And the packages, total packages it needs to install is 1353. And so far it has installed 58. Now this whole process could take anywhere from 10 minutes to half an hour or 45 minutes, depending on the speed of your computer where you are running this VirtualBox. What I will do is, from this point on, I'm going to fast forward this entire installation. So if you are sitting now, I will ask you to go ahead and take a break, take a coffee break, or get something to eat. And once it's done, we'll start right from there. So I'm going to fast forward right away and see you on the other side. All right, so congratulations. The installation has been completed. As you could see at the bottom right here, it says CentOS is now successfully installed and ready for you to use. Go ahead and reboot to start using it. And also a little message at the bottom that says use of this product is subject to license agreement found at this location. But anyway, you will get the license confirmation that you can read through and accept it in the next once it reboots. So go ahead and click on reboot. Again, this message appears. You could go ahead and close this. Since it is starting the first time, your operating system is starting the first time, it could take us a little while for it to start back again. But that's fine, perfectly fine. Now, licensing part. I want you to go ahead and click on licensing information. It says license not accepted. Go ahead and click on it. And right here, read through it and click I accept the license agreement. And click done. Network and host name, we already configured that earlier, so you don't need to configure it again. Now click on Finish Configuration. Now it is going to start the GUI, the CentOS operating system GUI now. Alright, perfect. So now you'll see it shows you on the top, it shows you the time, some network information, a speaker, you can power it off from here, just like, you know, as if you see on the Windows environment. Now go ahead and click on your name, because this is the account that you created. I hope you did not pick Imran Afzal, because I hope you picked your own name while we were going through the installation. So anyway, go ahead and click on it. Now provide the password. And once you provide the password, click sign in, it will log you in. But going back again, if you want to log in as root, then you could click on simply not listed and put in the username as root and put in the password. But anyway, I want to log in as myself. I'll put my password in and I'll hit enter. Okay, now we have this desktop looking type of environment that has two icons on it. One is my home folder, one is the trash can. They're pretty big. I usually keep them smaller, so you could go ahead and right click on it and you could do resize icon, and then you could drag and make it smaller. Just like that, right click, resize icon, and drag and make it smaller. You could also move them around, up and down, left and right. So this is your desktop environment. Now if you want to start your terminal, now by the way, if you are doing this for the first time, this is the first welcome screen after the installation. You could just leave it as welcome, and it's going to say English is for United States. I have that selected. I'm going to click next. Typing, it's already selected for me English. If you want to change that now, you could change it as well. Click next. Location services, I like to keep it disabled, so click on off and next. Connect to your online accounts. I don't like that. I want to keep my Linux machine private, secure, so I'll click skip. And I want to click next is start using my CentOS Linux. Once I click on that, it will bring me back to my desktop. On the desktop, as I was explaining it earlier, you could right click and click on Open Terminal. By the way, this help getting started. Genome helps opened up again. I don't need that, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to close that. Again, these windows are popping up because I am using this operating system for the very first time. So I could go ahead and close that, and I could start the terminal back again. So anyway, you could close that window. Anything that shows up like software updates available, you don't have to get it now. You could click on not now. And this is the terminal that what you want to see, and this is your command line terminal where you could run all the commands, and that's where this is our platform where we will learn everything about Linux. So you're ready? Let's go. Hello folks, this is where we're going to do the CentOS installation version 8. Now, as I said earlier, that if you do not want to go through with CentOS 7 and you want to go to with CentOS 8, Perfectly fine. This entire training or this entire course covers both 7 and 8, new feature, old feature, everything. And if you, again, if you want to, if you prefer, you want to go with 8, let's go ahead and do it now. First thing first, we need to have the CentOS 8 ISO downloaded on our computer so we could attach it to our virtual machine and then we could do the installation. So I will go ahead and open up my Firefox, and I already have my Google open, and I will type CentOS download ISO. The very first link again will take me to the latest version of CentOS. So the first one I'll pick is CentOS ISO Linux DVD ISO, and it will take me to all the mirrors that actually has the CentOS 8 version. And I could pick the first one, a second one, it doesn't really matter. The I would prefer you go with the first one. If it doesn't work, then you go to the second one. Anyway, I picked the first, and now it is asking me to save that file. Now, I have already saved that file previously to save some time, so that is why I'm going to cancel. But if you have not saved it, I would like you to go ahead and click on OK, and it will actually save it to your default location of your downloads. I'll go ahead and cancel at this point. And now, once it's downloaded, I want you to go to your Oracle VirtualBox. And one important thing is if you are downloading and installing CentOS 8, please make sure you have Oracle VirtualBox 6 and above. This is the one that is mostly compatible with CentOS 8. If you do not have 6.0, you could go into the file and click on check for updates, and it will take you to the right link where you could actually upgrade your Oracle VirtualBox. Anyway, now we are doing CentOS 8. I want you to go ahead and click on a new and type in CentOS or Linux CentOS 8, or any name you decide. The name is not important. Anything that you could remember or you could relate to. And by default, it will pick type Linux, the version Red Hat 64. You could pick 64 Red Hat, or you could actually pick the one that you picked, or if it shows up as other 64, doesn't really matter. So I will leave it as default that it picked Red Hat 64 and click on next. The memory 1 gig, leave that default. The storage, create local virtual disk, click on create, leave it default VDI, default dynamic allocated, and now the size of the disk, I would recommend that you pick 20 gig. Go ahead and click create, and now it has created your Linux CentOS 8. Go ahead and click on power on. Once the window opens up, it will ask you to check where is your ISO image file is located. My ISO image file is on the location. When you click on this little folder, click on that, and if you have your ISO image file downloaded on your desktop, then you go to your desktop or wherever the location is. My location is my personal folder in ISO folder, and here is the ISO image for me, CentOS 8. Click on open, and now go ahead and click on start. Okay, so this is the page where it gives you two options. The first option, it gives you install CentOS Linux 8.0. Second option is test this media and install CentOS Linux 8. Now, if you have the physical disk attached to your virtual machine or your physical machine, then it's always a good idea to test that media because many times that physical media has scratches on it. So it will create problems during the installation. But since we have downloaded the ISO, then it's best and it's perfectly fine if you pick the first option. So you go ahead and hit the up arrow key, and it will highlight install CentOS Linux, the very first option. Go ahead, click enter. If you see this message top, you have the auto capture keyboard option turned on. This will cause the virtual machine to automatically capture the keyboard. That is perfectly fine. You could close it. Basically, what it's saying is if your mouse is stuck inside of this window, it's because we have certain features enabled. You could get out of this window by clicking the control key, the right control key on your keyboard. So I will just simply go ahead and ignore these messages by clicking the close. Now basically what this is doing right now is it is actually copying some of the information from the ISO image that we have attached. It is taking that and copying it into its memory. And the memory will actually see, hey, give me the installer that will allow me to go through the installation wizard to do my CentOS 8 installation successfully. So I'm just going to have to wait for it to start that GUI, that installer, and once we have that, then we go through the installation. By the way, you could also do the command line installation. So on the very first page, you could have done that modification as well. But if you're doing it for the first time, I will definitely recommend you go through the GUI installation. So as you see, it's showing starting installer. So give it a minute or less than a minute. I'm very hopeful. All right, on this screen you will get the welcome to CentOS Linux 8.0 or the build. It could be 1905 or whatever. What matters is version 8. What language would you like to use? We'll pick English, and I'm in the United States, so I'm going to pick English in the United States and click on continue. On the second screen, you're going to see installation summary. CentOS Linux 8, the keyboard is US. You could leave that as is. You don't need to click or change that. The localization, the keyboard, it is automatically testing and it notices that we are in the United States. So it's going to pick the keyboard as English US. Next one is language support. It's United States and English. The time, again, it's America, New York. If you are in a different region, then it should pick up that region. If not, you could click on it and you could select the desired region. Next one is on the software selection. You're going to see installation source, which is our ISO image. So that shows up as local media. Second one is software selection, server with GUI. By default, it's going to give you server with GUI. You could go ahead and select this option. And you're going to see in the base environment on the left hand side, these are the base environment. On the right hand side are the add-ons for selected environment. Um, every base environment has all these add-ons. So if you go to, for example, server, you're going to see these different servers that you could run or these different applications that you could run on your server. You probably heard of FTP, NFS, DNS, all these services that actually runs on Linux or on a server. You could pick based on your requirement, or if you're doing in the production, you could pick depending on your application team requirement. Again, minimal install, meaning when you pick this one, it will not install GUI. But with that minimal install, you could also pick some of the tools that you think are appropriate to do your troubleshooting or systems tool configuration. Workstation, this is a workstation, is a user-friendly desktop system for laptops or PC. Custom operating system, virtualization host. I actually want you to go through each one of them, go through each and every add-on package, and just make sure you understand and make yourself aware what are the packages or add-ons we have available. But for this training, I want you to simply select server with GUI, which was previously selected as a default, and go ahead and click done. Okay, once that is done, you're gonna notice that it's checking with this ISO image. Hey, I need server with GUI. Do you have all the required packages and the local media, which is the ISO image? It says, okay, let me check. And it goes back and look through the packages and says, yes, I do. That's why you see both of them now into the black font. The next one we have right here is installation destination, meaning where do you want to install your operating system? Which disk do you want to install it on? And you remember when we were configuring the virtual machine, we carved out 20 gig. And by default, it has that 20 gig selected, as you can see right here. In the storage configuration, I'm going to leave it as automatic, which means I am going to let Linux decide how it wants to partition this 20 gig. If I click on custom, then I would have to specify, meaning I want you to give 5 gig to home, I want you to give like 5 gig to var, I want you to give the remaining to root. That comes into custom. So this is a very beginning. I don't want you to get into this because it requires some extra skills. If you are doing it the installation for the first time, then my suggestion is leave it as automatic and go ahead and click on done. Okay, next option under the system is kdump. Kdump stands for kernel dump. If something goes wrong with your system, something crashes, and if you have that kdump enabled, then it will log all the errors and or those messages. So you could go back and review what caused the server to crash. So I'm going to leave that as enabled, or which is selected by default. Next one is network and host name. You click on it and let's change the host name. Right now it shows up at local host.local domain, which shows on the right hand side says current host name is localhost. Let's go ahead and change it to Linux CentOS 8 and click on apply. Again, you could pick any host name that you like, and then you could apply it and it will show up on the right hand side. This one shows our networking right now is disconnected because it's turned off. Here's the hardware address, which is the MAC address. Here's the speed, which is the 1 gig. Go ahead and click on configure. And on this screen, I want you to go to the Journal tab and click check mark automatically connect to this network when it is available. It means every time your computer or your operating system reboots, it actually going to connect to the network automatically, so you don't have to enable it or start the network again. Go ahead and click save. And now you're going to see it has some more information like IP address, default route, DNS. So go ahead and now I want you to click on done. So host name and network is done. Security policy, if your company has some security policy or if you're installing CentOS 7 or 8 in your production environment, consult with your security folks, find out if there are any security policies that you need to apply. But I would say 9 out of 10 times this option is not usually selected, so leave that out and click on begin installation. Alright, while it's starting the configuration or doing the pre-check of the installation, it's going to ask you for user setting. It's going to ask you for root password. You need to set the root password and you need to define at least a user. Let's go ahead and click on root password first. I'm going to specify a root password. Based on my choice, it is weak. I understand. I do not recommend you guys to pick a weak password, pick a strong password. But since for me this is a lab, so I'm gonna just leave as is. And by default, Linux sees it as a weak password, and it asks you to press done twice to confirm. So if your password is weak, then you have to press this done button twice, 1 and 2. And now user creation, and let's pick a user. I'm going to pick myself, Imran Afzal. Of course, you have to pick your own name. And by default, Linux picks the first name, initial, and the complete last name. Leave these settings default and pick the password. All right, password again, my password is weak, and that's fine. I'm going to press the done button twice. All right, so now the prerequisites for the installation is done. Now it is downloading packages, meaning it is going to that ISO image, and it is asking, hey ISO image, give me all my required packages. And now it is preparing transactions from that installation source. And what is that installation source again? It's our ISO image. Now once that is completed, then you're going to see the actual number of packages that will show up that actually are needed for this installation to complete. And once you pull it, it will show you. So most likely it's probably going to be somewhere around 1200 or 1300 packages because we are going through the GUI installation. When you have GUI selected, GUI takes a lot of add-on packages as opposed to the command line or without the GUI installation. So anyway, so if it comes up like 1300 packages, you need to leave it running. It could take anywhere, I would say the installation would take anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 to 4 or 45 minutes, depending on your computer resources, depending on the speed of your computer. So I would say at this time, you could go ahead and take a coffee break or a lunch break, and then you could come back after half an hour. And what I will do is I will go ahead and fast forward from this point on. So this way, I'm not going to waste your time and my time. And then once it's done, I will meet you on the other side. All right, congratulations, guys. We have successfully completed the CentOS installation. As it says right here, complete. CentOS Linux is now successfully installed and ready for you to use. Go ahead and reboot to start using it. So, of course, go ahead and follow the instruction and click on reboot. All right, when you get to this screen, you're going to notice that it is starting back again on the CentOS Linux installation screen. The reason it is doing that is because by default your ISO image is still attached to this VM virtual box. So what you need to do is you need to remove that ISO. So when your system reboots, it doesn't think that it has to boot off of that ISO image. So for that, I would tell you to go to So to get out of this window and release your mouse, click the control key on the right hand side of your keyboard. Okay, so and click on devices, optical drives, and simply click on remove disk from virtual drive. Then it will prompt you to force unmount, meaning remove it forcefully. That's fine. Go ahead and click force you unmount. Now it is unmounted. You could verify again by clicking on devices, optical drives, and there isn't anything that attached. Beautiful. Now you need to reset this machine. Click on machine and click on reset. It will prompt you, do you really want to reset the following virtual machines? Yes, that's fine. Click a reset. Now it is starting your CentOS version 8 operating system. Okay, when you get to the initial setup page, you need to select the license information. By the way, if you got to this page after 2 minutes or 3 minutes, that is perfectly fine because this is initial configuration. First time your operating system is started, it could take some time. It could take longer than what it will take you later on. Go ahead and click on license information and click on I accept the license agreement. Of course, I would recommend that you read through it and click on done. And then click on finish configuration. Alright, when you get this to the screen, meaning that it's waiting for you to log in now. So I have created my account earlier during the installation. So I will click on it and it will ask me to put in my password. So if you go back again, click cancel, and you want to log in as root, then you have to click on not listed and provide the username as root. And then you need to provide the password for the root, and that is the password that we picked during the installation. Anyway, I want to cancel it. I want to log in as myself. Once again, if you're logging in for the first time, then it will take some time for the operating system to come online. So don't worry, be patient. If your mouse is captured inside of this window and it's not going outside of it, then please remember you could click the control key, the right control key on your keyboard to get out of it. All right, so the desktop, the only important thing that I see on the desktop is your terminal. So right here, you could go ahead and click on that terminal, and it will give you the platform to actually run all those commands that we're gonna learn throughout this training. So that terminal is you could use either console and use that terminal, or what we could do is we could find out the IP address of this Linux machine, and then we could log in as through PuTTY. Anyway, logging in through the PuTTY is something that I will show you later. But anyway, at this time, again, as I said, since this is started for the first time, it's gonna make you go through some initial stuff. Like at this point, it's giving you a welcome screen. If you need to change your language right now, you can, but just leave it default. Click next. Typing, again, is selected for me. Click next. Location services, I would like to keep it turned off. So I'm gonna move this to the left and click next. Connect your online accounts. I would not like to use those right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and click on skip. And the last option, the last screen is giving me you are ready to go, start using CentOS Linux. So click on start using CentOS Linux, and it should go back to your desktop right after that, where we have our terminal that we opened up earlier. Alright, so again, as I was saying, this is the terminal. That's the one that you need to use to run all the commands. And you could get yourself familiarized with the desktop as well, the GUI desktop. But I would say 80% of the environment and the production corporate environment do not use GUI. So be ready to use command line. Don't get too comfortable with the GUI. Anyway, congratulations once again. You have completed the CentOS 8 installation successfully. Now you could go ahead and close this help window that will also give you some information about Genome that will tell you about the GUI. Anyway, good luck, and let's get moving on to the next lectures where we'll learn a lot about the command lines and the commands that you need to learn. What is security and what is OS or operating system hardening? Let's talk about security. Hey, isn't the security everybody knows about? Yes, it is, and it is that simple. But let's go over a quick definition of what security is. Any type of protection against harm, right? So you have a house, you want to protect your house. You want to protect yourself, or you want to protect your computer. Anything or any type of protection against harm is defined as security. So, what is a computer security then? Well, in Wikipedia language or in a very formal language, a computer security, cybersecurity, or information technology security is the protection of computer systems from theft or damage to their hardware, software, or electronic data, as well as from disruption or misdirection of services they provide. Now, the first part is very simple, that you want to protect your computer from a loss of hardware or software, and of course the data itself. But the second part says it's also a security to protect against the disruption or misdirection of the services they provide. If your computer is providing any type of services, so if it is under under attack, or there's a breach to your computer, then not only your data will be gone, then most likely your function of your computer will also be impacted. So, computer security is also designed to protect your services as well. Let's talk about Linux security. Linux security. Now, Linux is an open source or open source operating system whose code can easily be read by the user, but still, it is more secure operating system than compared to many other operating systems. Okay, perfect. So if it is more secured by any other operating system, then why do we need Linux security? The need of Linux security arises for basically two reasons. One is internal, meaning you do not have access to the outside world, but still you want to protect your computer against damages or against mistakes. So if you have a local user environment that people log in, whether it's QA and whether it's DevOps, or even yourself, if you are a computer system or Linux system administrator or engineer, you could make mistakes as well. So you want to implement some kind of local security. When you make a mistake, that mistake either first does not happen, or second, if it does, then how you could correct that mistake. So that's an internal security that you could implement. Second, or external type of security, or the need for the security of Linux is external. If your Linux computer is servicing services such as HTTP, FTP, NFS, or anything like that. By the way, I mistyped that FTP twice. What I meant to type is NFS. But anyway, so any services your computer is, or your Linux computer is servicing, that service is actually interacting with users from outside or out on the internet. Then you definitely need some type of security on your computer, around your Linux computer. Let's talk about OS hardening. What is OS hardening? And what is the difference between OS hardening and security? Well, OS security and hardening used interchangeably. There's no difference between them. Mostly hardening is used in a Linux environment, whereas security is used in mostly all other operating systems. In simple words, hardening is used when making the operating system so hard to break. So you will make your Linux operating system so secure and so hard by implementing certain principles, certain rules, that it will become so hard to break. So when if someone asks you, hey, have you done OS security on your Linux computer environment? That yes, security and hardening is pretty much the same way. So we'll cover more topics about Linux security and hardening in the later lecture. Let's keep going on. Now let's look at securing all operating systems. When we say securing all operating systems, we're talking about securing them in a corporate environment. Of course, if you are using a Linux operating system at home or in a very small type of environment, you only have one machine, then you only are concerned of securing that specific operating system, whether it's Linux, Windows, or whichever operating system you're using. But if you are in a corporate environment where you are working with multiple servers and databases and applications, then most likely you're working in a tiered type of environment where you have some type of databases running on Windows, you're running the web servers on Linux, you're running the WebLogic, the application piece on Oracle or Solaris. This type of mixed different operating system environment is actually the corporate type of tiered environment. So it is very important when you have this type of environment, you need to secure all the operating system around it. So let's say if you have if you're supporting a retail company, right? And they have a web servers that is the front end of the company where people will come in and make the purchase. Most of the time, the web servers they run on Linux. So they are running, that's a front end, and the back end is running on Solaris or Oracle, which runs, let's say, WebLogic application, or maybe it's also Linux. Again, depending on the corporate what they choose. And then the third tier would be the databases where all the information is stored. And sometimes people use Microsoft SQL and IMf&x and SQL, different type of SQLs databases. So anyway, they all run a different operating system. If you change it around, maybe the Windows is the front end, Linux is the middle, and the last one is Solaris. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is any environment that you're working on that consists of multiple operating system, you just not only have to secure that specific Linux system, you have to secure every other operating system that it deals with as well, because it's possible if it's Windows is the one that is facing the internet, that is getting the virus or being attacked and is being passed through Windows to Linux. So no matter how much secure your Linux is, you're still getting the virus from Windows. Similarly, if you have Solaris server or Oracle server in the end and you have all the security patches and everything implemented on the last tier, which is right here, and you have not done a good job on Windows or Linux side, then eventually you are compromising the Solaris operating system. Anyway, to put everything in a nutshell, make sure all the operating system in the environment are actually secured as well. Let's talk about types of security breach. We will talk so much about how we could secure our Linux system, but before we get into that, let's talk about what are the different ways the security can be breached. The first one is about data. So data is the number one security breach. Anyone who hacks your system or invades it or breaks the security barrier, they want the data. And as I said before, the whole IT is about information, and that information is secured and saved in data. So when the data is breached, they could be that could be stolen, it could be corrupted, or it could be removed from your entire system. So data is the number one security breach. Then moving on, the application. The application security breach, meaning all the application or the software that is running on your operating system. When someone hacks your system and they cannot get to the data, then the second target would be the application, meaning they will disable or they will dismantle the application that actually processing the data. So that could be like an Apache server. If you are on a retail industry and you know you make millions of dollars in a day on a retail, and especially during the day during the holiday season, and bringing down your Apache server, which is actually the front end of your system that is taking all the requests, will actually impact your revenue. Another example of application would be the database. So you're running Microsoft SQL or Oracle database or IMf&x, any type of data. So the attack could be on your database. Then the financial application. If you are into a financial world or if you're running on financial, you've probably seen so much security around it. So they have applications that are actually crunching the numbers. What will happen if those financial applications are brought down? Well, this will disable the entire financial sector. So that's why every time an invader or hacker tries to get into a machine, they will try to attack those financial applications. Then moving on, the third type of security breach is this operating system. So if a hacker cannot get to the data or applications, then they get to the operating system, the system that is actually facilitating The entire process, the system that is saving the data, the system that is providing the resources. So that could be file system corruption, or it could be a complete system failure. Your whole system is down, or the process management. Anything that runs on the memory or CPU processes that is actually handed over from one place to another, that could be impacted. Then the last one is the hardware system security breach, where someone would actually attack your hardware and actually attack on your CPU, your memory, or your system peripherals, and actually disable or remove or actually corrupt your system peripheral devices, and those are so important for your system to run or function. So there are a few of the security breach that we need to talk about, and we have actually listed all of them. We need to make sure all of these data application and operating system hardware are protected. And how are we going to protect them is everything that we will talk about in the coming lectures. Okay, now we actually going to run the chage command. So it's not change again, it's chage. So change age. That command is specifically used to set the parameters around the password. It is not used to make any changes to the user account itself. To change or make any changes to the user account, you will use user mod, which we learned in the previous lecture. Okay, the command is, again, as I said before, is per user basis. You could actually run the command chage with -d, -m, and all different options that we covered. Again, -d is for last password, -m for minimum, -m uppercase M is for maximum, -w is for warning, -I is for inactive, -e for to expire. Okay, now let's get into my Linux machine right away without wasting any more time, and now we're going to make the changes of the user we previously created in our earlier lecture, and the username was Babu But. Okay, so we know the account exists. We have created, we verified it. Now we are going to make the change of that Babu But password parameters. Before we make the change, let's grep for Babu in etc shadow file. Since I only have one Babu, so I could just simply grep for Babu instead of the complete name Babu But. Okay, here you'll notice it has all the default information. The username, the password, the last password change, minimum, and all other parameters. Same default value. These are the value from here till the end are the value we are going to change. And again, the reason we are making this change is so we could secure our environment. And of course, our entire topic is about securing the environment. So we make that change for one specific user to change the environment. Now, to run the command chage, you could do -d for last day, and I would not like to make that change because I want it to be consistent with the system's time, and the system time is days since January 1st, 1970 that the password was last changed. If I make that change right now, I can't keep track of the password change. So right now, if I take this number and minus the date of January 1st, 1970, then I could tell the password was changed today. So I don't want to make that change. I want to keep that for my own information. So I will start with -m, which says minimum. What is that minimum? The minimum number of days required between password changes, that is the number of days left before the user is allowed to change his or her password. Meaning if you are changing password today, and if I make this 5 right now, it means you cannot change the password until those 5 days has already been passed. So right now, as you notice, it is set to 0, meaning there is no restriction. But for this exercise, we'll put 5. Next one, we have uppercase M, which is maximum. What does this maximum mean? It means the maximum number of days that password is valid. After that, user is forced to change his or her password. So right now, the total number of days I have to change my password is 99999, which is a lot. Too many days. So the system is not going to prompt the user to change his or her password until that day comes. And of course, hopefully we all live to that age, but that's not possible. So it's good to make the user change his or her password every, let's say, 3 months. So that makes it 90 days. So I will put 90. So every 90 days, the system will prompt this user, hey, your password is expiring, so please go ahead and change the password. Then the number 6 is warning. So for warning, meaning before it expires. So I want the system to notify the user 10 days before the password expires, which is 90. So I'm going to put 10. So automatically the system does the calculation for you, and it will see, hey, the maximum number of days is 90, so I have to remind the person 10 days before. Next one is minus E, is to inactive. That means the number of days after password expires, the account is disabled. So if your password expires today, your account will be disabled tomorrow, day after tomorrow, or whenever that is specified right here. So I will say delete, disable the account if the password is not changed. Disable it after 3 days. Okay, the last one is expire, which I pick E. Sorry, the inactive one was I. And the last one expired days. Since this account is disabled, that is an absolute date specifying when the login may no longer be used. So you could specify a number when the password is actually completely expires. Actually, the earlier one, the inactive one, is an inactive, meaning it's making the account is inactive. Now the expire one, days since January 1st, 1970, that account is disabled. So it will does the calculation until that account is disabled. So for now, you could leave that. Okay, so I just ran the command and it gave me an error message. Okay, now I know why it gave me an error message, is because I forgot to specify the username. Which user am I picking to make that change to? That is why I'm getting this options. So that is Babu Butt. Okay, so it took it and it gave me the prompt back. Now I am going to view these parameters in Etsy shadow file. So I'll do grep Babu Butt Etsy shadow, and here you'll see I didn't pick the -D option, which is the last day of the last display. You can make your own last day from whichever date if you want, but I'm just leaving it to system default. That's why I didn't pick D. The next one, if you notice, I have number 5, which was the minimum day I picked right here. Then the next one is maximum. It has system will remind the user to change the password or force the user to change the password after 90 days. And then the next one is W, is a warning. It will remind it 10 days before. And 7 is that it will inactivate the user account after 3 days of password expiring. So that's how the CHH password works. Parameters to change it. If you want to make that change throughout your systems, then which file do you have to modify? Yes, Etsy login defaults. And that's a common practice. I would recommend you can modify there. But if you are making changes to a few users only, then I would recommend that you use CHH command. So that's one of the CHH command that is mostly used for securing your user environment. We have learned what is Etsy password, shadow, group, login defaults, and how the configuration or parameters in each of those files work. Now, in this lecture, we are going to create a user account and change its password. So that user account can be used in the later lectures to set the password parameters for that specific user, and we could play around with that specific user. So what we'll learn in this lecture are two basic commands, and I'm sure those commands most of you are already knew about it. One is user add and second one is password. User add is to create the user, and second one is to set or change that user's password. There are other user related commands that can also be used, such as user delete if you want to delete the user account that's been created, group add if you are creating a new group and eventually all the users you wanted to create want to be assigned to that user, you could use group add, or group delete if you want to delete that user that is no longer in use. And the last one is user mod, which is to modify the user. All those four commands, I will really go quickly over them, but I'm sure you already know them. But our main commands that we wanted to cover is user add and password. Again, this lecture is not about showing you how user add or password command works. This lecture is about creating the user and changing his password, and then eventually using that account to run a certain different commands for security purposes. Let's go into a Linux machine. Okay, I am logged in as myself. My host name is my first Linux machine. So these are the two commands you should always run whenever you log into your Linux machine to make sure you are not executing the commands on a wrong machine. To create a user account, you will run user add and the name of that user. In this case, I'm going to create a user Babu but. It returns my prompt back, which means it created my user account. I could run id babu but, and you will see that user id that is assigned to babu but and group id are assigned to babu but is 1006. By the way, just Babu Butt is just a character in one of my favorite shows, Seinfeld. So most of the characters that I pick are based on that TV show. So no other specific reason. So just the character that I'm picking. All right. So now when you do grep Babu Butt in Etsy password, you will see its username, the password column X, ID, user, home directory, and the shell it's using. Remember we covered that in Etsy password lecture earlier, few lectures before. Second lecture we covered about Babu Butt in Etsy group, and it tells you the group name is Babu Butt, its group password, and 1006 is the group ID. Then we covered about Etsy shadow, exactly, and that's where it's telling me that Babu Butt is the username, and here you see 2 exclamation point, meaning it's telling me that I have not yet set a password for that account. The password age, when was the last time password was changed? Since, if you remember, what was that? I believe it was July 1st, 1970. Since that day, if you calculate until today, you will see the total number of days counted are 18,085. And the remaining fields you are already aware of. This is the number in which you cannot change the passwords between. This is the number in which the password will expire. This is the number, I believe, where you have password warning. Yes, I just remember. So always keep a reference, a cheat sheet with you to remember those. So now the next command that we will learn is password to reset the password of Babu Butt. It's going to ask to change the new password. put in a new password again, and all authentication tokens are now updated. When it says bad password, the password fails the dictionary check. It is based on a dictionary. It's because I have picked a password that is actually found in a dictionary. But that's okay, since you are already root. Root can do anything, but if you were changing this as a regular user, it won't let you make that change. Okay, now when you do again grep babu button at C shadow file, now you will see the actual password. It is really long, which is encrypted password. So that is completed. Now the next thing is that I wanted to really quickly cover is the user delete. It's the command delete a user account and related files. So if you wanted to run that command followed by the user, let's say in this case babu but, it will delete that account. Same way, if you wanted to create a new group, you could do group add and it will create a new group. Group delete will delete that group, and the last one is user mod to modify the user. Now remember, this modification is not the modification of CHH. CHH specifically deals with changing passwords, setting the password limitation, the maximum number of passwords, the days and stuff. This user mode is to modify user IDs, and let's go in and I'll show you the expiration date of that user, not the expiration date of the password, meaning after certain days the account itself will be locked out or expire. It will become inactive if you use -F option. You could change its group ID by typing -G. It will change the new login. It will change the lock. If you wanted to create a user account for only 10 days, let's say there is a consultant in your company who is there for only a month or 10 days, you wanted to create his or her account, and after creating the account and the person leaves, you wanted to lock that account. And so the best way to do it is picking -L option. You create an account with minus and user mod L option, and after certain days it will lock it out and you're good, so you don't have to worry about that account going in and deleting it. Well, it's good practices that you should go in and delete or disable it, but just make sure you have that -L option set. Then the password, if you wanted to change the password using user mod, you could do it here as well with -P option. Why do we have that as separate to password? I'm not sure why, but anyway, it is there. There are two different ways you could do that. That's fine. And if you wanted to change its shell, you wanted to change its user ID, you wanted to unlock it, and you wanted to put it in SC Linux for any more configuration and the files that are related to that command. So anyway, so remember that user mod command is only dealing with user modification, meaning user ID, user login, user disabling. Change command is the one that deals with password security parameters. Of course, that was something that we'll cover in the next lectures. In this lecture, we will talk about setting up your password policy. So if you are working for a corporate environment, you probably be looking into defining the password policy or following the existing policy. So those password policies can be set in different files. There are three main files where you could set the password policy. One is etc login.defaults, which we have already covered. Second is etc pam.d/auth system-auth, and the last one is etc security pwquality.conf. PW stands for passwordquality.conf. These are the three main files, the configuration files, that are used to set or define your password policy. We'll go over a few examples through the document that I have, and we will cover that by going through each file. So let me open up my document. By the way, that document is also attached to the handouts of this section. Okay, so to set the password policy, set the number of days for password expiration, which you already know the password max days is 60 in etc login.defaults. Then next one, set minimum number of days available for password. Again, this is again in vi etc login.defaults. The line number will be 26. Again, depending on your operating system, I am specifically talking about Red Hat or CentOS. If you are using a different Linux flavors, the lines might be different, or perhaps the file names might be different, but you could look it up online. Then set the number of days for warnings before expiration. So line number 28 in etc login.defaults, that's where you set up password warning. Then moving on, limit using a password that was used in the past. So if you don't want your users to use the same password that was set previously, you could specify that in etc pam.d/system-auth. Let me open up my computer and log in. I'm logged in as myself, as root. I am in root directory and my host name is my first Linux machine, which I know is my lab machine. Always make sure you have that set. So before you modify any of these files, please make sure you create a backup of those files. For example, if you're modifying etc login.defaults, I would recommend you create a copy, which would be cp/etc login.defaults to login default-org. I call it like that as original. You could call it as backup or whichever name that you prefer that will allow you to remember later. That creates a copy and then when you vi the file etc login.defaults, you will see the first one, password minimum days, line number 26. You could hit colon 26, hit enter. It will take you exactly to the line we're talking about. So these are basically the 4 parameters that you could set in the etc login defaults. Again, we have already covered it, so I'm just going to quit out of this configuration file and I'll move on to a different file, which is limit. Let me move up. Limit using the password that was used in the past. If you want to limit that, you would have to go to vi etc pam.d/system-auth. Again, whenever you modify any configuration file, the best practice is to create a backup. Name it original or backup or whichever name that you pick. So when I hit enter, you go to the line that says password and the second one module says sufficient. And at the end of the line, which stops right here, you get into insert mode and type remember equal 5, which means you cannot use the same password for at least 5 last passwords. So then you could save it and exit out, but I will not save it since I'm just using it for the lab. You could change it again depending on your requirement. If your corporate requirement, the password corporate requirement is, let's say, 10, that a user cannot use the same password, same last 10 password, then you will put in 10. Next one is set minimum password length. Okay, so if you are using the password, let's say up to 8 characters, you could actually specify here by changing it to 10 or 15, again whichever your corporate password policy requirement. The password configuration file that you have to modify is etc auth password quality. You can modify there directly by going to the file, or you could run this command, which is called auth config -- pass min length equal 8 -- update. So if I do vi etc security pwquality.conf, and I come down to the line that says min length, which is minimum length. Right now I have it set to 9. I could change that to 15 or 10, again depending on your requirement, and I'll take away this hash, which means if you have hash removed, it will be in effect. Again, I will go ahead and exit out without saving it. I'm just going through as an exercise here. The next one I have is set minimum number of required classes of characters for the new password. Like, do you want uppercase, lowercase, digits, others, anything that you want to have users to follow. You could run the same command --pass minimum class to --update. Each has a different classes. You can find that in the same file, which is etc security password quality, passwordquality.conf. The last one, it's telling you to do the grep. So if I'm doing grep min class into etc security pwquality.conf, you will see the minimum is set to 0, which is for now it's not following anything. You could change that to the defined number that matches your requirement. Then set the number of allowed consecutive same characters in the new password. Set to 2 for maximum number of allowed consecutive same characters. You could have consecutive same characters like AB, but you cannot have C because that violates your policy. So you could also specify the same thing in etc security password quality and max equal repeat, or you could run the command auth config --pass max repeat to space --update. Then for another password, set maximum number of allowed consecutive characters of the same class in the new password. Set 4 for maximum number of allowed consecutive same characters of the same class, and you have that as a command, and you could also modify directly by going into etc security pwquality.conf. Next one is require at least one lowercase character in the new password. Same, everything is set into this file, and the command is given right here. Require at least one uppercase character in the new password. You could do the same way by running this command. By the way, this uppercase, lowercase are set separately, or as I said, if you wanted to use different classes, which I showed you earlier, right here, set minimum number of required classes. That will pick it for you, uppercase only, or lowercase only, or digits only, or others. Then require at least one digit in the password. If your password policy is to have at least one digit in the password, you could set that up again in the same etc security pwquality.conf file, or you could run this command auth config --enable required digit space --update. And if you're modifying it manually, then you would type DC credit, find that line, and set it equal to -1. Then require at least one other character in the new password. If you would like to edit the value, edit it in the VI and edit in the password quality, or you could simply run this command auth config enable request other update, or require other update. Then the last three I have is set maximum length of monotonic character sequence in the new password. If you want to have a sequence, for example 1 2 3 4 5, the max you could have in the digit is 3. Same file, pwquality. Set the number of characters in the new password that must not present in the old password. So it will do the comparison. If your old password has 5 same characters that you're using in the new one, it will not let you change it. So you could set it to 2, 5, or whichever the number that you pick. And the last one, check whether the word longer than 3 character from GEOC field of the user's password entry or contained in the new password. Excuse me. So this is the check that it will do whether the word's longer than 3 characters. And you could again do this in Etsy security password quality. There are a few of these settings. You could also find more settings. There are a lot more settings, but mostly all that password settings can be set again in 3 files. And those files are Etsy login.defaults, which goes directly toward the password expirations that we talked about, system auth, and pwquality.conf. That sets your password policy for your lab or for your corporate environment. The next lecture is about disabling SSH access for a specific user. We already learned how we could restrict access or disable access of a root account to SSH into a machine. But what if you wanted to disable access for any specific user, not just all the users, any specific users? So that can be done in a very easier way using the same file that we used to disable access for root. So what we have to do here is, of course, we become root, and as a good practice, as I always recommend, and that you create a backup. So make a copy of Etsy SSH sshd underscore config file, put it somewhere in /temp or where you could retrieve it if there is something goes wrong in the original file. Then you edit the file, edit the following line in sshd underscore config file, but if that line does not exist, then simply add that line at the end of the file. So the line is simply deny users space the username. Of course, in this case, the username is not exact the same username as I've written. It will be the actual username that you want to restrict or disable the SSH access to the system. And then, of course, at the end, to have that in effect right away, you have to restart the SSHD service on your Linux machine. Alright, so now let's try it and see how we could get it to work. I will log into my Linux machine and I will try that out for one of the user in our Linux environment. So before we do that, let's go ahead and copy Etsy ssh underscore ssh d underscore config. I wanted to copy it to our temp directory. I already have an older copy of it. I will go ahead and overwrite it. So hit yes. Now the copy is made. Now edit the file vi etsy ssh sshd underscore config and look for the line that says deny. Hit enter, and you could look for a line by simply typing / and the name that you're looking for, or the keyword. Hit enter and you will see it says pattern not found. It means there aren't any parameters in this file yet that indicates that, or that dictates that this user should not have SSH access. So what I'll do is I'll go at the end of the file, which you could just scroll down or simply hit Shift G, and it will bring you down all the way down to the last line of the file. And whenever I add any new parameters to any configuration file, I put down a comment what that parameter is for. So I'll say deny any specific users, and that parameter would be uppercase D, deny, uppercase U for users, all one word, space, and the name of the user. In this case, I am going to pick a user that already exists in my system, and that is Seinfeld, Seinfeld. And hit enter, or just leave it as is, and just simply save that file. Again, make sure that user exists, because if it does not, it's really not going to apply any of those changes to that specific user because it's not going to find that user. All right, so before I go ahead and restart my service, I will make sure as a Seinfeld user I'm able to access the system just to first make sure. Seinfeld, password in, and I am in. Perfect. So now I'm able to access. I'll go ahead and exit out, and I will now restart the system SSH service. Okay, it's restarted. Now I'm going to log in as Seinfeld again by clicking on duplicate session. Seinfeld. And I can now log in and it will tell me access denied. That's how you could restrict a specific user's SSH access to your Linux machine. That same function or that same requirement can be achieved by modifying the etc password file, and instead of putting /bin/bash as its shell, you could just put in /bin/log no login as its shell, so it won't be able to log in either. And of course there are many other ways. You could disable its password, you could lock that user account, or you could go to pam.d configuration files to also disable that specific user. Let's look at this next lecture, which is about locking or disabling user account manually. So in the previous lecture we covered that by default the user accounts will be locked or disabled after a certain number of days of inactivity. But what if you wanted to, or if you don't have that mechanism in place and you just want to check the list of users who haven't been logged in for a certain number of days and you wanted to manually lock them? Let's cover that part in this lecture. So another command to check user status is a last log. That command followed by -b option and the number of days, which directly lists users who have not logged in the past 90 days. However, it also has a header, so use tail to skip the header now. So to remove the output, you mean remove the first line of that is the header, you could use the tail -n+2. By the way, I will run these commands, all of them one by one, but let's go over all the details or all the contents of the slide. Then you could also use grep to filter out system users to be specific. So there are system users that you're going to see that don't have a login, or they don't log in actually. So you could exclude them to be specific to those users that are not system related. And that's the command to disable your user. So once you identified which users that you have or which user been pulled up, then you could disable them by running the command usermod space -l, or uppercase L, remember that is username. You could also use the command password with lowercase l and username. Or the third option is that you could change the user shell to bin no login in the etc password. This is a bit, I would say, a little risky, so don't modify the etc password, and you could make a mistake. So the best way to do is use usermod or password command. And now you have disabled it. What if you have disabled a user account by mistake, or you wanted to enable a user account after finding out, hey, this user should not have been disabled, or whatever the reason you wanted to re-enable it. To re-enable it, use the same command, but instead use uppercase. For password, use lowercase. And for change the shells, you could just modify the shell back to bin bash. Okay, so now let's go into our Linux machine, and here we'll run a few of those commands. So let's say I need to find out the list of users that haven't been logged in the last 90 days. So first let's do man on last log, and you will see it tells you report the most recent logins of all users or of a given user. B is before days. Print only last log records older than 90 days. So I'm using B option, meaning give me all the users before the 90 days. So let's run that. last log minus b and 90. This is going to give me a whole bunch of list. That is also, but before we get into refining that, the one I listed to remove the header, you notice that there's a header here. It says username, port, from, and latest. So I'm going to get rid of that header, that first line. And for that, I will do pipe tail minus n plus 2. This will get rid of that first line. If you go up, you probably notice, see, there is no line. Okay, and the last part I said to exclude all those that says never logged in. Exclude all of them. So for that, you will filter out one more time, and you would do grep minus v, and then you could put no or never log. So colon, single colon, never log. That should be enough, and you hit enter. And oh, what happened here? Grep minus v, never. Oh, I used uppercase L. That's what happened. And there you go. That's what the information we needed. And as you notice, I have these number of users, total 4, Seinfeld, Lane, George, Kramer, that actually have never logged in for the last 90 days. Now, I have identified that. You could also um, narrow down your search by picking only the first column is awk print $1, and this will only list the first column, which is Seinfeld, Elaine, Jordan, Kramer. Now again, you have identified those users. Now the time to lock them, and to lock those users, you could run the command user mod minus L username. So in this case, I will do Seinfeld, and it has locked the account. How do you verify it has locked? You could actually grep Seinfeld from Etsy shadow file, and you will see this little exclamation right here, which tells that the user cannot log in. So if I try to log in, duplicate session, and I try to log in Seinfeld, put in a password, and it will tell me access denied. There you go. See, that's what happens. So if you want to unlock, all you have to do is U to unlock or re-enable that account. So now let's try to put in my password. There you go. So the password came in and it works. There was one failed login attempt since the last successful login. That was a fail, and that's what it complained about. Same thing you could do. Let's minimize or move that to the side. Same thing you could do with password, passwd minus L option, and it will do the same thing as user mod. Why we have one command or not the other, or why we are not using one or the other, it really doesn't matter. As long as you get your job done, get your security done, everything is under control. That's what matters. So now you know how you could lock or disable accounts manually in your Linux system, and that is one of the critical part that you should know to secure your Linux environment. Let's look at locking or disabling user accounts. Disabling inactive accounts ensures that accounts which may not have been responsibly removed are not available to attackers who may have compromised the credentials. So it is important that system at least should automatically lock those accounts that haven't been used for a while. So a file that is /etc default user add file, which is the default file whenever you run a command user add to create a user, it actually goes into this etc default user add file and looks for the default value in place. And that is used to set the default configuration of a user whenever user add command is ran. To specify the number of days after a password expires, which of course signifies the inactivity, until an account is permanently disabled or locked, add or correct the following lines in etc default user add. And of course, when you look at the etc default user add, and you will see inactive line or row or section. That line, you have to replace the numbers with the correct number of days that will reflect your policy or your security setting. So we'll look at the etc default user add in a second. Then we have a value of 35 is recommended. So if you wanted to put a value in there in inactive section, then 35 is recommended. If a password is currently on the verge of expiration, then 35 days remain until the account is automatically disabled. So let's say if your account is expiring or your password expired today, you still have 35 days until your account is completely locked out. However, if the password will not expire for another 60 days, let's say, then 60 days plus those 35 days, that becomes 95 days. That are the days until the account would be automatically disabled. So let's look at our Linux machine and we'll cover the etc default user add file. So I am logged in as root and I'm logged into the correct host. Good. So now let's do cat etc default user add. And if you notice, it has a few lines or few parameters that you could set for your every time you run the user add command, and the one that we are talking about is this one, inactive, and that has to set to equal to 35. Other fields, let's talk about them one by one. So in etc default user add, the group is the first one. The second one is home directory. Third is inactive, expire, shell, skel, and create mail spool. These are all the fields that are in etc default user add configuration file. So now let's go back and look at that configuration file one more time. And then we could say group. The first one is the group. So which means maximum number of groups for which a user can be member of. If you have a user, let's say um, Peter Pan or ABC or whatever the users that you have, that user cannot be a part of a group or part of groups total of 100 or more than 100. So if that user is part of the group of 101 groups, then it's not going to work. Then when you create the user add, when you create a user with user add command, the default home directory will be /home. Here is inactive. This is the value that we're talking about, or this is the parameters that we're talking about. Number one means never inactive. That is always active. So by default, the operating system has this configuration. It says never disable or lock the account. Expiry is the date on which the account should expire. It is given in the form of year, month, and date. Now we're talking about the account expiration. We're not talking about the password expiration, which we talked earlier in etc login.defaults. Remember? That is different. That was for password, and this is for the account. So there is no value set because we don't want the accounts to expire. So that's why we leave it as is. The shell by default is bin bash. Skel is the directory from where the default user profiles will be copied to the user's home directory. So if you have that set and you have certain parameters that you wanted to set or certain environment that you want to bring in, then you have to specify in that directory. The last one is create mail spool equals yes, meaning this option ensures that a user will have a directory of its username in the var main where the mail process can store mail messages. So if a user is doing some activity or someone sending a mail to that user, that mail will go into the var and the username and the mail directory. So these are the parameters that you could actually set. and these are the something new that's been added. But if you run the whole user add minus g to specify the group minus u and whole different options, you could do that as well, but those options have already been set for you. And again, the one that we're looking at is the most important one, is inactive. Best and one of the main security measures is that if a account has been inactive, nobody has logged in for a while, that specific number of days, lock that account, which is a very good practice that everyone should follow. And the way that you could find if the account is locked or not, you could grep for that user. Let's say IFSol etc shadow. You have to look into etc shadow and you will see the username colon, and right before dollar sign you'll see an exclamation character. That means the account's been locked. So these are the default values. Keep that in mind. Try them. And of course, every time you try anything new that you never tried before, always take a snapshot of your virtual machine or take a backup if it's a physical machine. Now let's look at another security measure, and that is lock user account after 3 failed attempts. So when a user tried to log in and the user provided a password, and the 3 times they provided the password and it's been incorrect, the account will be locked out. And how can we implement that security measure in our Linux environment? So let's look at that. First we have to do is become root and copy these 2 following files, because any mistake that you do in these 2 files, it will prevent you from logging into the system regardless if you're logging into as root or as any user. So make sure you copy these 2 files into a different directory. I chose temp. You could choose any directory that you like. Or I would also say please take a snapshot of your Linux VM. The next thing we have to do, edit these files. Of course, once these are backed up, copied, we will modify both of them. And what we will modify it with. In the first line, when we open up the system auth file, we will add these parameters, which is auth required pam underscore tally2.so, deny equal 3, one error equal fail. If something goes wrong, what the error messages will throw, it will throw fail. And unlock time is 600, meaning 6 minutes, meaning if the system locks the user after 3 failed attempts, then the system will automatically unlock it after 6 minutes. Then you have to go down, scroll down to the account section and add the second line at the bottom of that section. And that line is account required pam underscore tally2.so. Try to log in as any other user and then enter the wrong password 3 times. This is what we will try to do in our exercise. And then you could see how many failed attempts a user had by issuing this command, pam underscore tally2 dash dash 0 equal the username. And we will find out if the user cannot log in. We will verify that the reason the user couldn't log in is because it failed that many times. Also, users will be automatically unlocked when using the lock time, which I already explained. It's just 6 minutes. If you want to enforce this or unlock a permanently locked user, use the -r option together with the -u option. And that syntax is pam underscore tally2 -r -u and username. I have tested this entire process already, and I have tested in CentOS and Red Hat. It might be similar in Ubuntu or Debian or other Linux distributions, but please take cautions. Try it out first and see if it works in other distributions as well. But what I'm trying to say is I have not tested that in any other distribution except CentOS and Red Hat. So now let me log into my machine and we'll go over one by one and see how we could test locking out a user after 3 failed attempts. So I have my Linux machine right here. And the first step, as I said, is we will make a copy of pam.d password auth into temp. We will do the same thing for system auth temp. Alright, now it's copied. Perfect. Now we'll go in and modify that. Now before modify, I already copied these parameters into a file. I'm just going to copy and paste it there. So that parameters I have copied in my temp parameter file, and these are the two parameters. Now I will go ahead and vi the etc pam.d system auth file. Vi it, and on the first line we have to paste the first line, not the second line. It's just that I copied it. That's why I'm going to remove that. Now make sure you're just aligned with the format. It will still work if it's not aligned, but it will look neat if you have it aligned right. Then the second one, next scroll down to the account section right here, as I said, section, and add the second line at the bottom of that section. So the account section is right here, and I'm going to add that right here. Now again, I copied both lines, so that's why I'm going to remove this line, the first one, and leave the account line only. And again, I'm going to format it the way it should be to make it consistent with the file. That's it. You just go ahead and save it. And you notice that you have updated system-auth. Now many times when you update system-auth, it also updates password-auth. So let's verify if the password-auth is also updated. So vi the etc pam.d slash password-auth. And you notice, nope, it's not updated. That's fine. We'll do it here as well. The same way we did it before. Come down to the account section. Required. Okay. Now please, once again, pay close attention. The auth section goes here, and the account section goes here. Please do not add to both lines by mistake. I just copy paste. That's why it was showing up two lines. So take extra precautions when you make changes to the file. So that is changed. Let's save it. Now both files have updated. So let's try to see if that policy has been enforced. So I'm going to try to log in as a user that I have already in the system, and that username is Seinfeld. And I'm going to put in a wrong password. 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, and now at this time it should have locked me out. Now I'm going to put in the right password for that account. And it is still giving me access denied. The reason because I cannot log in because it has already locked me out. So let's verify it by running the command pam underscore tally to -- user equal username, which is Seinfeld, to verify if my account has any information there. And it does say that there are 4 failures, of course, at the time of the failure, the date, and where is it logging it from. So it is locked out. Now if I wanted to unlock that account right away, I would have to do pam underscore tally to -r -u and this username Seinfeld. Now it has logged out, unlocked it. So if you run it again, the earlier command pam underscore tally 2, you will see the failure has reset to 0. So now let's come down to that putty session again. I have it on this side, and I'm going to put in the password, and you will see it says the account was locked due to the 4 failed login. So it's telling me why it happened before. So now we logged in and it's telling me there were 4 failed login attempts. since the last successful login. So that's how you could actually lock a user if the user tries to log in with wrong password 3 times. And that's a very good security measures. Every Linux operating system should have that, and every system administrator should implement this security measure in their Linux environment. All right, let's talk about restricting direct root login. Now, again, this is another way that you could secure your Linux environment. How? This is actually adding another layer of security on your Linux system. Now, instead of you logging directly into Linux machine as root, you will log in as a regular user. So, as you know, a regular user will have a very, very limited access to the system, or there are certain things the regular user or high level privileges that regular users cannot do. Only root could do it. So, if a hacker would actually try to log in as root and your system has root access enabled, and then he or she becomes successful, then what happens? That person, that hacker, could do anything because now they have root access. Now, if you disable that direct root login, now we are not talking about disabling root access to the console, we are talking about disabling root access through the SSH, like you do it through the PuTTY or from another Linux machine. That root access should be disabled. As we all know, root is a very powerful account in Linux, and its access should be closely monitored. Who is logging in as root, what commands they are running, and whether it's the right um, decision to disable root account login access. Therefore, one of the security measures is to restrict direct login access, and it's very easy to configure that, and it shouldn't take more than a minute for system administrators to enable this security feature in a Linux machine. Important things to remember, of course, before you restrict the root login, make sure you have a regular user account. And I know you're probably thinking, hey, of course I would have a regular user account. That's how I will log in. But certain times people do make mistakes. They restrict root login, and the next thing you know is when they try to log in, they realize, oops, we don't even have a regular user account in it. So they lock themselves out, and what happens? You cannot log into the system. Then you have to come in as you have to reboot your server, log in as a local user account, make changes again to enable direct root login, and the whole 9 yard. Anyway, remember to have a regular user account to the machine. Now, the process, how does it work? First, you become root. You copy the etc ssh slash sshd underscore config file. This is the actually configuration file. That's where we make the changes to enable, uh, to actually restrict direct root logins. So make a copy, put it somewhere in temp or somewhere. Then you edit this file, and what are the parameters you will change? You replace permit root login space yes, which you will see is commented out at this time if you view that file. You have to replace it with the permit root login space as no, and of course take out the pound or hash sign before that. And the last step is to restart your SSH service, which is the SSH daemon that is running, so that changes could take effect right away. And the command is systemctl restart sshd. If you are using an older version of Linux or older version of CentOS or Red Hat, then you probably would have to use the command service sshd restart or stop and start. Anyway, let's log into my Linux machine. I will try it out and see how it works. Alright, so I have my Linux machine open right here, and as my practice or an exercise that I always do is I make sure who am I logged in as. I'm logged in as root. Am I logged into the right machine? Yes, I'm logged into the right machine. Perfect. Now, as I said, make sure you make a copy of etc ssh sshd underscore config, and I will copy it into temp directory. Now, before I make the changes to that file, let's first try to see if I could log in as root. So I'm gonna open up a duplicate session from putty, and I'm gonna log in as root. Perfect. So it means the root access is enabled. So this is the access what I'm trying to disable now. So let me close the session. Go back to the earlier session. Now I'm going to modify the etc ssh sshd underscore config file. And I am going to go to the line where it says permit root login. You could actually come down, or usually what I do is I'll just search for it, which is slash permit root login, and it will take me straight to that parameter. I have to take out the comment sign and take out the yes to no. So now it will not allow direct root login. Save the file. Make sure the file has the correct parameters by doing grep permit root login from etc sshd config file, making sure yes the parameters are set. Permit root login is set to no. The other one that you see is just a comment. You could just simply ignore it. Now you have to restart the SSHD daemon, which allows the SSH session to the system. And the command is systemctl reset restart SSHD. Okay, that is done. Now go ahead and try to log in as root. Start the duplicate session and see if it works. Nope, it's not working. It's not letting me in. It's denying access. That is the way we wanted the system to work, and that's a security measure that everyone should take in their system, and that security measure should be part of every security policies in the corporate world. So what you could do is you could log in as a regular user, like I would log in as myself, and then I could become root. That is permitted. That is fine. But you cannot directly log in as root. So that was the whole point of this lecture, is to how to disable direct root login. So if a hacker is trying to come in as root, from the get-go, this access is completely rejected, regardless of who's coming in or whether they're providing the right credentials or not. Linux file ownership and permission. In this lecture, we'll cover what are the different type of ownerships and the permissions that are assigned to each file or directory. There are two owners of a file or a directory in Linux. One is for user and the other one is for the group. The command to change file ownership is change own and change group. Change own changes the ownership of a file, whereas change group changes the group ownership of a file. So a user can belong to a multiple group as well. So as long as that user is part of that group, that user can make changes of the file permissions. You could use recursive ownership change option as well. So if you're running change own with minus uppercase R and the file name, sorry, a directory name, then it will actually change the ownership or change group of that file and subdirectories within that directory. Linux is a multi-user system. Every file and directory in your account can be protected from or made accessible to other users by changing its access permissions. Every user has responsibility for controlling access to their files. Permissions for a file or directory may be restricted to by types, and those are three different types of permissions. So these are permissions that we will cover, which is one of the critical um, part of security. When you are securing your file system, you need to make sure who is getting read, write, or executable permission of your file in order to secure your Linux file system. And those file systems permissions are three of them, and they are listed as follow. So each permission can be controlled at three levels. User for user itself, who created the file. Group, the person that belongs to that group, can be people in the same project or other, and everyone on the system. So there are, let's say, 10 users, and those 10 users are not part of that group. They are considered as every other user. File or directory permission can be displayed by running the ls-l command. So you will see that every file starts with dash, or every directory starts with D, and their permissions are first three for user, second three for group, and third three for others. Command to change these permission is change mod. So whenever you create a file in your file system, most likely it will be created with these type of permission. So it is basically all combined together, but you have to look very closely. The first three bits right here, these are called bits. 1, 2, 3. These first three bits is for the user itself who created the file. The second three bits, read, write, and no bit, meaning no permissions for executable, is for group. And the last one is for read only for others. So that's how you could actually separate each permission from a file permission levels. So in the next lecture, we'll actually go through a couple of labs where we will actually create files and change the permissions to make our Linux file system more secure. All right, let's get into our lab and see how we could change the permission to make our file system more secure. I am logged into my Linux machine and I am logged in as myself. So when I create a file, let's say touch New York as NY, hit enter, and when I do ls-ltr, you see all at the bottom is my file ny is created. And by default, this file permissions have been assigned read write for me, read write for my group, and only read for others. So if I wanted to change that permissions to allow others as well, then you have to run the command change mod. Others are referred to as O for others, plus. To change and assign the write permission, you have to do write space ny. Hit enter. And to verify it, you could do ls-l ny, and you'll see the permission that's been assigned is right here, which was not there before. Now what if I wanted to actually change or take away the group read write permission of the file ny? I'll do change mod. Group goes for O, others go for, sorry, I wanted to change the read write permission only for the group, so minus rwny. Now when you do ls-l again ny, you'll see that the middle three bits are no longer there. So it means anybody in my group, which my group is right here, that means that group members are not allowed to read, write, or execute that file. By the way, execution, which is x bit, is only assigned when a file is a script. So the user can execute or run that script. That execution permission is also assigned to a directory. So if a directory has executable permission, it means you are allowed to cd into that directory. So now let's say I wanted to remove the write permission for myself for ny. I'll do change mod. Myself is user my own minus write permission ny. Hit up arrow keys to go back to the last command, and you'll see now that write permission is gone. Executable permission, I could assign that as well. So let's say if I wanted to assign executable permission to myself to ny, I'll do change mod execution for myself plus x for execution ny, and do ls minus ly and ls minus l and y. So you will see that is that file has been assigned executable permission, and it changes color because some of the Linux distributions do changes color when it changes the file type. So now it become a script, so that's why it became in green color. So again, don't focus too much on the color, focus on the permission, how it is changed. Now if you wanted to assign the group of let's say you wanted to give read permission to the group level to the file ny, then what command you would run? You would run change mod group, and now since you're assigning it, you put plus. We're giving read permission as r, and then ny. Again, do ls minus l, and you will see the r permission right here that's been assigned to it. So let me open up another terminal, duplicate session, and now I will log in as Seinfeld, which I have another user in this Linux machine. Alright, let me clear the screen, and now if I go into so as you see, I am as Seinfeld, and this is IFZOL, and I fall in this category as read write. So I do have a permission to read this file or delete this file. So let's go if I wanted to go ahead and delete that file. So I'll go ahead and cd home IFZOL, and it says permission denied. Whoa, why is permission denied when I have access to read that file? Is because if you go one step back, right now you are home IFZOL, you go one step back, which is /home, and do ls minus l, you will see the user IFZOL, the permission is only the user itself is allowed to read, write, and execute or come into this directory. The rest do not have any type of permission to come in. That's how I cannot delete that file. Now, if I change that permission for others to come in to that directory, so let's say if I do change mod others plus to come into that directory is execute for IFZOL, ls minus l, and you'll see I do have a permission. I'm allowing user to come in to my directory. So let me see if I could go back into that directory. Yes, see, I'm in that directory. Now, if I do ls minus l, it says permission denied. Why? Because I am already in that directory, and the reason it's not letting me in, or sorry, the reason it's not letting me read the content of that directory is because as others or as Seinfeld, I do not have read permission to read the content of that directory. I will go ahead and assign the reading permission for others for my directory. Let's verify it, and you see it has been given the read permission. Now if I do ls minus l, I'll see all the content of the /home/ifzol directory. Now if I wanted to delete the file that I created earlier, which was ny, so if I do remove ny, it says permission denied. Now why it's not letting me delete when the file actually telling me I have given the right to delete that file by giving that read permission? The reason it's not letting me delete is because if you go back to the home directory, the home directory says anybody who wants to come into that directory is allowed, which is X, perfect. Anybody who wants to read the content of the directory is allowed, which is R, perfect. But anybody who wants to edit or delete anything in it is not allowed. That is why I'm not allowed to delete that file, regardless if it has the delete or write permission to that file for others. So which means the permissions are cascaded or inherited from the parent directory or the directory above it or wherever it's directly coming down from. So if I go ahead and change mod and give that write permission for my directory IFZOL, let's verify it, and now everyone in this computer or in this Linux machine can come into my directory. They could read or execute and write to that files that I have in my home directory. So now if I try to remove it, I should be able to remove. See, now if you do ls-ltr, and you'll see it is gone. But again, it's not a common practice to give these permission to everyone. So that is why you need to make sure who you are assigning those permission to, and whether that user is a reliable user who will come in and share the resources that you have in your directory. So if you wanted to take away those permission again from that directory, you would do change mod for others minus read write execute ifsol. Do ls-l again, and you will see that permissions are gone. Same way, I wanted to take away the group write permission. I will do change mod group minus w for ifsol, and it goes back to the same directory permissions that we had earlier. I am already in that directory. Seinfeld probably thinking, hey, I'm already in that directory. Now I can, even though you changed the permission, I could still view it, right? So Seinfeld goes in and say ls-l and it says, oops, permission denied. Okay, so let me go one step back. I am in home directory. Let me go back in there. Can I go in? No, now you are not allowed. That's how the permissions of a file or a directory are given in a file system. And I'm sure a lot of you already know this. If you don't, this is something you really have to deal with on an everyday system administration work, where you have to allow users to actually come in and change permissions of your file. So now let's quickly take an example of this file ny. So I'm going to go ahead and create that directory, that file again, touch ny. And you notice it is owned by ifsol and ifsol group. I could change that group to Seinfeld, and then the Seinfeld as a group user can come in and delete that file by looking here. But again, even though I changed the ownership to Seinfeld, I still cannot delete it, because if you go one step back, you will see the groups are not allowed to do anything either. So anyway, this is how the permission works. To change the permissions, you could use these syntax. There are other ways you could change permission with the digit numbers. A lot of people use digit numbers to assign permissions. I prefer to use these simple way of assigning and removing permissions, but again, I am not limiting anyone to use one method or the other. You could pick any method that is that's your preference. So, but the point is, the security of the files is what matters in the end. Next lecture, I'll cover about how we could change the ownership of a file, or the group ownership of a file. All right, this is the time about changing file ownership, and this is the lab where we will cover how we could change the ownership of a file and the group ownership of a file. So let's log into my Linux machine, and I have my Linux machine right here. First check, who am I? Who am I? Okay, that's myself. Am I logged into the right server? Yes, I am. Let's clear the screen. Okay, now I am in my home directory. I am going to create a file and I'm going to call it NJ as in New Jersey. Do ls-ltr or NJ, you will see it is owned by myself and the group that owns this file is myself. If I wanted to change the ownership of that file to root, I would first have to, of course, become root. Before I assign anything to root, I have to be root. So let's say if I wanted to assign change ownership of the file New Jersey to root NJ, it will say operation not permitted because you are basically what trying to do is as a regular user IFZOL, you're trying to change the ownership of that file to root. But have you asked root if root allows you to do that? Otherwise, if that's possible, then anybody could make any file and make it owned by root, right? So that's why root doesn't allow that. So to allow anything or change ownership of any file, you have to be root. Become root. Now go to home, IFZOL directory, ls-l nj file, and now if you try to change the ownership, change own to root of which file? nj. Do ls-l nj and you will see it is now owned by root. Similarly, if you wanted to change the ownership, which is right now the group ownership of this file is IFZOL. So if you wanted to change it to root as well, you do the different command which is change grp for group, same syntax root, the file name. Do ls-ltr or lnj to check the permissions or file attributes. You'll see it is owned by root and it is owned by root group. Now become IFZOL again by simply typing exit. So I'll go back to the previous shell. Who am I? I am IFZOL. I am in my home directory and let's make sure the nj file is there. Yes. Now I am going to remove that file nj. And it's going to tell me remove write protected regular empty file. It is a warning because it is owned by root and it is owned by root group. But when I do Y, it will still go ahead and delete that file. The reason it deleted that file, regardless of who owned it, is because if you go one step back to your home directory and do ls-l, you will see that IFZOL right here, the attributes of IFZOL and the permissions of that IFZOL directory says it is owned by IFZOL, it is owned by IFZOL group. And when this directory is owned by these two entities, the user and the group can read, write, and execute anything inside of that. So regardless if it is created by root and the root is the only one who has permission to delete it, you could still delete that file being yourself because it is in your home directory. So now let's become root again. And now let's go to etc directory. Here I will go ahead and create a file. I will call it, let's say, FL. It's just the acronym for the state Florida. Let's see if it has been created by doing ls-ltr, and you see it is created. It is owned by root and group is owned by root. And only root can read and write. Only others, the group can read and others could read and they cannot do anything else. So I'm going to go ahead and open up another session and I will log in as IFZOL from the other session. Now I will go to etc, do ls-ltr or simply FL to Florida, and you'll see the file is there. Now if I try to remove that file, FL, it will say remove write protected regular empty file, same message that we had when we tried to remove the file in our home directory. So this time when I hit Y, do you think it would delete it? No. it will give me permission denied. See, because now if you go one step back to root and do ls minus l, and you will see slash etc, which is right here, telling me that only root is allowed to change or create files inside of this directory or delete that file. The others are allowed to come in and read, but they cannot make changes. So if I wanted to go into slash etc, it allows me to go in because I do have, as others, I do have executable permission to come in. Nice. Now, if I wanted to create a file in here, let's say touch um, CA as in California, and it says permission denied because I cannot create any file inside of that directory because that directory do not have permissions for me to allow to create. Now, if I change that to allow group right here to read or to create files inside of the directory, do you think I'm still able to create it? Let's see. If I go as root, this is root, who am I, root, right? I go into slash directory, ls, and I'm going to change mod to group plus read to etc. It says now group can also go in and changes it. Now if I am in etc and I try to run that command again, it will still tell me that I cannot create it. Why? Because as ID, if I run ID, I am the part of a group IFZOL. I'm not part of the group root. If I wanted to add myself to the group root, then I could go in and create a file. To add myself to root group, of course I have to run it, or I have to ask root to add me there. I cannot just go and add myself to it. So I'll go to the other terminal and I'll run the command user mod minus a to add to group, which group to root, and which user you want to add it to that root group. I want to add ifsol. Now that group, now that user is part of the group root. If I run id again, you'll see well, it still says it's not added, but let me try here. Group etc grep, let me grep ifzol etc group. Yeah, I am there. I think I probably have to log back in. So let me try exiting out and oops. Let me open up a duplicate session and I will log in as ifzol now. And now this time I run ID, you'll see I am part of the group root. Okay, now if I go to etc directory, and now if I try to touch or create a file name is CA for California, I am able to create that file. When I do ls minus ltr, you notice it is created and I'm the owner and I am the group of that. So that is why the permissions and ownership plays very important role. You could change these permissions the way you want to. If you wanted to change this to root user, you go into etc. You could do change owner to, let's say, Seinfeld, and which file? CA. ls minus l CA. You'll see it is now owned by Seinfeld and the group is ifzol. Now can I, being a Seinfeld, go in that directory, in etc directory, and delete that file? No, because I am not part of the root group, meaning Seinfeld is not part of that root group. Even though if you change the group to Seinfeld and to the file and do ls minus l ca, you'll see it is now owned by Seinfeld and Seinfeld. Now if you log in a third session as Seinfeld, you could go into etc ls minus l to ca, and you'll see this file exists, owned by Seinfeld, owned by group Seinfeld. Now, do you think Seinfeld can remove that file? No. Why? Again, if you go one step back, it says at C directory, only group people are allowed to make changes. Now, is Seinfeld part of that group? ID? No. Seinfeld is not part of the root group. So again, if you want to make that Seinfeld part of the root group, you have to assign that permission using the same command that we ran before, which is change mod root, and here you will assign Seinfeld. Now you should be able to delete that file at C, remove CA. You have to log back in because then the user has to read the environment and the changes to take effect. At C, remove California, and it's gone. And when you do ID, you'll see the Seinfeld is part of the root group. So anyway, this whole lecture was about adding or changing the ownership of a file and changing the group ownership of a file. Hopefully this lecture serves its purpose. Again, if you have any questions, send me a message and I will be more than happy to clarify any confusion that you have. This lecture is about changing SSH port on your Linux machine. Now, let's first take a quick review how a server connects from one server to another. Well, of course, you know that it connects from IP to IP. If your server has an IP and the remote server that you're trying to connect has an IP, but it doesn't end right here. Every server that runs services to listen has a predefined ports. So to connect from any Unix-like operating system to another Unix-like operating system, you have to connect through SSH. And the SSH port runs on port 22. And that is by default, that is out of the box, that's the port you get. And if you're running Telnet, you will see it is running on port 23. Anyway, Telnet should not be using at all because it's not secure at all. If you're using Telnet, you should stop it right away. So anyway, SSH port number 2 is the one that is used to connect to a Linux machine. And you could get a listing of all the ports in etc services. So by default, all the applications or programs or services that run in your Linux machine has a predefined ports attached to them. You could change them, but by default they come in as a predefined. And who comes up with those ports? Well, there is IEEE. Probably you heard of that organization. They are the one who would define which port connects to which service and so on. But anyway, we don't want to get into that. We just wanted to make sure how we could change that default port 22 to a different port. Let me get into a more figurative way so you will understand exactly what this whole lecture is about. So there is a server A, and that server wants to connect to server B. Now, server A would use some kind of a middle party terminal like PuTTY. Or if it's a Windows machine and it's trying to connect to another Windows machine, it will use something like remote desktop connection. Now, it has the built-in algorithm like PuTTY has that runs on port 22. If you open up a PuTTY, you will see where you put in the IP address right next to it, it has a port number predefined for you, which is 22. You could change that if you have changed it to the remote server. Anyway, so that you connect using the IP and the port number, and then you send the request to the remote server, server B. Now server B says, hey, I got the request and you are asking me, or you are trying to connect to me using port 22. Let me first see if I have a listening a SSHD service running that is listening on port 22, and it says yes, I do have SSHD running, and it is running on port 22. Perfect. And go ahead and create it and establish a session. Perfect. Session is established, everything works, everything's hunky-dory. Perfect. Now what happened when a hacker comes into the equation? A hacker wants to get into server B. Now, of course, he wants to get into every which way. So he usually, what hackers do, they have a pre-written script or executable that they have, which actually attacks all the ports. And whichever ports are open, they are in luck and they will attack that port. So the attack goes out and the attack says, hey, I am trying to get to these port 22, 53, and so on, whichever the service those ports belong to. So now, if you had changed that port from 22 to, let's say, SSHD change port to 110, then you would have prevented that attack completely. See, that's how you could change the port and make your Linux server more secure. Let's look at how we could make that change in a Linux machine. First of all, we'll make a backup of our configuration file. And the configuration file is etc sshd underscore config. That's where we go in and change the port number. Then we modify that file and we change the parameter that says port 22, change it to port 1110. By the way, 1110 is just an arbitrary number or any number that I picked. But make sure you are not picking the port that is being used by other services, because it's going to cause a conflict. To find out which port is available, you could go to etc services file, and whichever port that you'd want to assign to port SSH, then you could grep for that port and make sure it is not in use. Anyway, I have checked that already. The 1110 is not assigned or not associated with any services, so I'm going to use that port just for this practice or this exercise or for this lecture. Now, once that is done, I will save the file and I will restart the server or restart the service, and restart the services system ctl restart sshd. By the way, I had a single quote at the beginning, which somehow got deleted. But anyway, you don't need double quotes. So at the end of SSHD, you see double quote. You could just ignore that. Then from Unix like OS connect using command syntax like SSH username at IP-P for port and define the port number. Now I'll go into my Linux machine and we could try that on our Linux machine and see how it works. So right now, first, if you see, I'm gonna open up a new session, and you see right here, if I put in my IP address 192.168.1. Let's see, what is my IP address? My IP address 192.168.1.36. So I will put 36, and you see by default it's giving me port 22. And when I click open, it should allow me to connect. See, I'm connected. Perfect. So now I wanted to change that port 22. So let me close that, and I will go first make a backup copy. First clear the screen, copy etc sshd underscore config, and I will make a copy and I'll put it somewhere like in temp ssh underscore config, and I'll make it orig. It is copied. Perfect. If I make a mistake, I could always revert back to this file. Also, you could make a snapshot of your Linux machine as well, in case you cannot get in and you want to revert back. So now I have made a copy. Perfect. Now I will modify the sshd underscore config file. So I'll go to etc ssh and vi sshd underscore config, and I'll go to the line where it says port 22. I'm not going to modify that because it's already commented out. What I'll do is I'll add another line by hitting O, and I'll put port. P, make sure is uppercase, and I'll put it port 1110. That's it. Save it, and it will take effect when you restart the service. Systemctl restart sshd. That's it. It restarted. Now, when I try to connect, new session, load, and when I try to connect to this machine using port 22, let's see what happens. Open. See, network error, connection refused. Why? Because the SSHD is no longer listening on port 22. So that's how you could avoid the attack. Now, if you uh, wanted to do the same thing and you do new session and you do load the service and change the port 1110 and do open, and there you go. Now I am able to connect and it is working as expected. So that's how you could avoid the attack and how you can make your system secure. Hello everyone, and in this section we are going to talk about how we could secure our Linux operating system, and of course some of the most critical things that we should keep in mind to secure our systems. The first thing that I notice whenever I log into any Linux machine is the warning messages that shows up on the screen. Every server should have that warning messages, and that message is called message of the day. So when you first log into a terminal on a Linux machine, you are usually greeted by the system messages of the day. The message of the day gives you important information about the system or just messages from the system admin. That message of the day should have some kind of warning or some kind of a critical message on the screen for every user who logs in. So let's say if there was user, let's say John is logging into the system, as soon as John logs in, he should see a message on the terminal saying, "Hey, are you the authorized user to log into this machine? If not, come on, get out." Or sometime, I mean, more professional way. So that's what we're going to cover in this lecture, how we could create that message. So that will be like a first step in securing our Linux machine. It is important for every system administrator to set up MOTD file, which will alert users to be careful as their activity is being monitored. The file is a simple text message file can be that can be that can have a simple text message in it. And the file is in etc directory, and the file name is MOTD, again, which stands for message of the day. So what you could do is you could modify that file, put in anything you want in that file, and that message will is going to display every time a user log in. So let's take a quick look at our Linux machine and let's see if we could modify that file and add some warning messages in it and we could verify it. Okay, I have my Linux machine open right here, and every time you need to modify any file in etc directory, you have to be root. Okay, and now I am going to go and log in as a regular user. I'm going to log in as myself. And as you notice, as soon as I log in, it just tells me last login and so on. This is operating system message, has nothing to do with message of the day. This thing, the empty line, is something that's coming from the message of the day file. It has nothing. So now we are going to modify that file. So I'll go ahead and vi etc motd, and I'll put it here as hello world. That's pretty much it, just to check if that works. Now, of course, I would have to log back in as a regular user or any root user, and you will see that message will show up on the screen, and it says right here, "Hello World." So by default, whenever users log into a Linux machine, it goes into etcmotd file, reads it, and whatever in that file, it displays on the screen. I have a list of warning messages that should be added to that message file, which are like, of course, very well critical than just a hello world. So one of the message that I have already that I created earlier that is in my temp motd file. So when I do cat or more on that file, you will see it shows as unauthorized access to this device is prohibited. You must have explicit authorized permission to access or configure this device. Unauthorized attempts and actions to access or use this system may result in civil and or criminal penalties. All activities performed on this device are logged and monitored. When a user sees this message, I tell you one thing, that user will think twice before making any changes to that server. That is why it is a good practice to always put that message in your MOTD etc MOTD file. So what I will do is now I will go ahead and copy that file MOTD into the correct MOTD file. It will ask me to overwrite. Yes, overwrite. Now I will go ahead and when I log back in again as a regular user, I will see that message. There it is. See, when you see that message, you kind of think of it, oh, there's something not right. Maybe I'm not supposed to access that. Or even if I do, my activity is going to be logged in, so I have to be careful what I'm typing. Just putting this message actually adds extra security to your system. There are other messages that you could add to this Etsy MOTD file as well, and I have those examples of messages in a PDF document, and I have added that into the handout section, into the handout lecture of this section. So please go into the handout and you could download. And in this example, I could show you these are the examples I have message of the day. You could pick any one that you like, or you could pick your own customized error message, sorry, customized warning messages that will tell the user to be careful when the user logs in. So this is about our MOTD. Now, some of the people might be thinking, hey, how I can put in a customized way of putting into the MOTD, meaning when someone logs in, they should see a host name, they should see a time, or something like that. So for that, there are two ways you could do. You could actually add that as a script, and you could make that script run by cron job every hour, every half an hour, every 15 minutes, whatever the time you think is best, and then output that directly when the script runs, it outputs that to Etsy MOTD file. And this is how the file is updated, and the user who logs in the next time will be able to see that in it. So anyway, please do keep in mind message of the day file should be configured in every system as a security measure to make your system more secure. Okay, so let's talk about running one service per server. Now, what is a service or a program? Well, both service and a program are pretty much the same that actually runs on your server. So without running a program or a service on your machine, there is no real purpose of running your computer, right? So you do need your computer, your hardware, your operating system to run, and the end goal to run those is to run an application. And of course, that application is referred to as a service or a program or whichever that you want to refer it to. So they are all interchangeably used. So those are the services that run on the computer. Now, let's look at the security perspective. It is highly recommended that you use one service per server if your resources are in abundant, and of course your company policy allows you to do that. What is a services? Let's take example of those services. So services are like NFS, DNS, a web server, FTP, SendMail, and so on. There's so many those services and programs that we run on our computer or in our Linux server. So let's put it in a more graphical way so we'll understand what exactly we're talking about. So we have a server, let's call it server A, B, or whatever the server name that you want to give it. It has multiple services running, such as NFS, SMTP, FTP. Of course, the numbers that you see are the actual number of ports that are required to run these services. DNS, it needs port 53, HTTP port 80, NTP port 123. So all these services you could definitely run on one server. That's okay if you're running a lab or a development type of environment. But running all of these services on one server can actually make your system more vulnerable to attacks. How is that possible? Is when you have an hacker, that hacker now has more possibility to attack your system if he could try to attack it through different ports. So he could go to different ports, try one port, 249 doesn't work. He's going to try another port, 225 doesn't work. FTP port closed, doesn't work. Good. So maybe if one port is open, then of course, so if there are 10 doors for a thief that to access in your house, and one door he tries it, that door doesn't open or doesn't open the lock, what he would do? He will go to the next door, or second door, or third door, or fourth door, right? So he has those possibilities. The chances are become in his or her favor to open one door or the other. So that's what we are trying to eliminate. And that's why I would say the best architecture would be that you run one service per server, exactly like this. This will make your system or your environment more secure, and you're not opening up a lot of loopholes to get a hacker into your system. So keep that in mind. Of course, it doesn't require too much of resources. You could spin up a virtual machine running Linux with 4 gig of memory or one CPU, and that could actually serve that purpose of one Pacific NFS or one Pacific DNS or one Pacific FTP. You don't need to run all of them in one server and then beefing up that server to give it like 16 gig of memory and 4 or 8 CPUs to it. So if you have the architecture that where everything is running on one server, please talk to your manager and then try to separate those services by the server. Don't just go in and start changing things. Of course, you have to get it approved before you do that. So anyway, keep these things in mind. Definitely very important in security point of view.